Chapter 1135. But as the saying goes, when a person sits at home, misfortune will come from the heavens. The sky had completely darkened, and the twin city guards, which was not very large, had also sunk into a state of silence. However, outside the He mansion, there was a series of urgent knocks on the door, causing many people in the mansion to be awakened. No matter what, He Ying was still a general, so he was still somewhat vigilant. The knocks on the door also woke him up, but the long period of peace did not make him think too much. Instead, he could not help but shout outside. "What's going on? Who's knocking on the door? Why aren't you going to take a look?" Without needing He Ying's orders, the door was already opened. Following that, a military commander rushed into the residence and quickly arrived at He Ying's door. With an urgent voice he said, "Sir, there's someone knocking on the city gates. The person claims to be Navy General Song Yong. Our brothers are not sure. Please make a decision." "Song Yong?" A cry of surprise came from within the room. He Ying had naturally heard of this newly promoted Navy general before. Not only that, he had even seen this person before. But because the difference in status between the two of them was too great, they did not have a deep relationship. Song Yong was here. This made He Ying feel a little confused. No matter what, the other party was a Navy general with 50,000 soldiers. He was just a small Jianghu with 1,120 soldiers. The two of them were on the same level. Why would the other party come to his small twin city guards? His heart was filled with confusion, but He Ying did not dare to delay. He hurriedly put on his clothes and walked out of the room. When he saw the commander who came to report, he could not help but ask suspiciously, "Is it really General Song who came? Did you see clearly?" "This." "Sir, we are of lowly status. How could we know such a big figure like General Song? We are really not sure. That's why we asked Sir to make a decision," the commander said with a troubled expression. He Ying thought that his words made sense and nodded. Then, he arrogantly raised his head and walked towards the gates of the residence. As he walked, he said, "That's right, with your status, you naturally do not know General Song, but I do. Come, follow me to take a look." Under the admiring gaze of the Xianxia, He Ying left the manor and arrived at the South City Gate under the protection of several bodyguards. At this moment, more than 100 Beiming soldiers had gathered here. They were all in charge of guarding the place. When they heard that a naval general had arrived, they gathered around out of curiosity. After seeing the arrival of the Jianghu, everyone moved aside, allowing He Ying to smoothly walk up to the top of the tower. Then, with the help of the torches downstairs, who else could it be but Song Yong on a horse downstairs? Seeing that it was really Song Yong, He Ying was very surprised. "General Song, didn't you lead the navy to attack the Japanese Empire? Why would he suddenly appear here?" "Who are you?" Song Yong, who was riding on his horse, asked when he heard someone call out to him. "General Song, I am the Jianghu of the Twin City Guards, He Ying." Since there was such an opportunity, He Ying naturally wanted to introduce himself. He Ying wanted to establish a good relationship, but Song Yong was impatient and shouted, "So it's Jianghu he. But since you know this general, why don't you open the gates? Are you going to refuse to let Shangguan through the gates?" Instead of answering directly, he scolded. Unfortunately, there were people who fell for this trick. For example, He Ying was such a person. When he heard Song Yong scolding him, he quickly apologized and said to the soldiers beside him, "What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and open the gates." Naturally, no one dared to disobey He Ying's orders. Soon, there was the sound of the gates being opened. Then, there was the sound of horse hooves, and more black figures entered through the gates. At this moment, He Ying had already descended from the tower and was ready to welcome General Song Yong. However, when he descended from the tower, he was greeted with countless guns and arrows. Needless to say, this was the work of the soldiers of the 4th Infantry Division. With someone like Song Yong leading the way, the Twin City Guards did not even need to fire a single shot. Logically speaking, Yang Chendong could have chosen to launch a night attack. With the soldiers of the 4th Infantry Division, climbing up the walls of the Twin City Guards was not a problem. It was just that he didn't want to make a move on the Han people, and he also needed to preserve the 2 city guards. Because this place would become the Yang faction's logistics base for a period of time, a lot of money and food sent from the sea would be temporarily stored here. So in the end, he chose to let Song Yong stand out and make a contribution. He Ying was just a small Jianghu. According to the intelligence department, this person bullied the common people all year round and was not a good person. Yang Chendong did not even have the intention to meet him, and directly handed him over to the 4th Infantry Division's Ling.Xiang. He has lived here for a long time. He must be very familiar with the situation in Liaodong. Open his mouth and let him know something beneficial to us. Don't worry, 6th young master. A smile flashed across Ling.Xiang's face. After agreeing, he turned around and left. Pass down the order. No soldiers are to disturb the people. At the same time, put up a notice saying that I, Bugnam of Gojoseon, have come. As long as the people here cooperate with us, they can receive money at any time. You can go and do this. Yang Chendong looked at Beta Persei, who was following beside him, and assigned tasks. Young master, please don't do that. After following Yang Chendong for a long time, Beta Persei knew his young master's feelings for the Han people. He also worked as a logistics division commander for a period of time. Beta Persei was naturally familiar with this small matter. Thus, half an hour later, there were many notices on the walls of the Shuangcheng Guard Central City. A large number of people who were originally in a state of panic gathered to watch. Some literate scholars read the notices, and the other people knew that the one who came was King Wunan of Daemyong. The reason why they wanted to occupy this place was because when Bugnam of Gojoseon made a move against the Japanese Empire, his rear, the grassland, was attacked by Baiming. Now that the Japanese Empire was dealt with and became a province of the 5-star army, Bugnam of Gojoseon appeared in Liaodong. This time, he came to give those who wanted to deal with him a look. The notice also emphasized that they only wanted to deal with those who opposed them. As for the ordinary people, they would not offend them in the slightest. Once a soldier violated the rules, the people could go to the yamen at any time to report it. Once it was verified, not only would it be dealt with, the person who reported it would also be given a certain amount of silver as a reward. At the end of the notice, it was written, "Next, the 5-star army will send a large number of military supplies here. They will be transported in all directions from the Shuangcheng Guard Central City. A lot of labor will be needed. As long as the people are willing to participate, they will be distributed according to their labor. Based on preliminary calculations, a strong man could earn 1 tael of silver after working hard for a day. Even a capable woman could earn half a tael of silver." The notice that was posted quickly attracted a lot of discussion among the people. This was also Yang Chendong's request. He did not want to deceive the people. He wanted them to know what was going on outside and let them participate. This would give rise to a sense of ownership, and in the future, it would be twice the result with half the effort. The notice was written clearly enough, and as expected, it attracted all kinds of discussion among the people. So it was Bugnam of Gojoseon who came. I heard that he loves the people very much, especially us Han people. It seems that there is no need to worry. Yes, Bugnam of Gojoseon treats the people well. With him around, of course we are safe. But it says that Baiming is attacking Bugnam of Gojoseon's forces in the grasslands? What does this mean? Isn't Bugnam of Gojoseon our great Ming dynasty's Bugnam of Gojoseon? An honest-looking man in his 40s scratched his head as he spoke with a confused look on his face. In fact, it was not only this middle-aged man. Many people had the same expression. They lived in the Shuangcheng Guard Central City all year round, and because the transportation was not developed, they did not know much about what was going on outside. Fortunately, there were some knowledgeable people in the crowd. They had traveled extensively, so they knew a bit more. Facing this question, they gave an explanation. What do you know? Some of the territories in the grasslands did not originally belong to our great Ming dynasty. That was the world of the Mongol cavalry. Their horses are like the wind, and their people are like ghosts. Wherever they go, they eat people without spitting out their bones. They are still nomads, and other than raising some livestock, they don't know how to do anything else. They don't even have any iron tools. In order to survive, they have set their sights on us, the Han people. They would often rob the Han people stationed there. Other than robbing things, sometimes they would even rob people. That is very abominable. This brother is right. Those Mongol cavalry are very vicious, especially in the recent years. Our great Ming dynasty has allowed them to do whatever they want, causing them to not know how to restrain themselves. Their actions have become even more vicious. I was also fortunate enough to go to the grasslands. I heard that it was because of the appearance of Bugnam of Gojoseon that those Mongol cavalry were defeated. Many grassland tribes were cleaned up because of this, and some were even destroyed. Yes, I went to the Jianghu Left Guard Central City a while ago. I heard from a friend there that there is a very magnificent city in the grasslands. There are countless Han people there, and they live very comfortably. That was built by Bugnam of Gojoseon. That friend also said that since Bugnam of Gojoseon was in the grasslands, the safety of the Han people was guaranteed. Who knows how many people there have worshipped Bugnam of Gojoseon in their homes, saying that they are thanking him. The few people spoke one after another and quickly told the story to everyone. Most of the Han people who did not know all of this before now knew that Bugnam of Gojoseon was actually so powerful. However, a problem appeared. An old scholar who was literate but had never traveled far asked with a puzzled expression, "Since Bugnam of Gojoseon is so powerful in the grasslands and has done so many things for our Han people, why is the Beiming Imperial court looking for trouble with him?" Chapter 1136. Seeing that it was the old scholar who spoke, someone at the side laughed. As expected of a scholar. Don't tell me you think that everyone in the world is a good person just because the books are all good people. Don't you know the phrase, "A great achievement alters the emperor"? That's right. Bugnam of Gojoseon is so powerful and powerful. How could he not alert the emperor? It's normal for him to take action to suppress them. Haven't all emperors been the same since ancient times? It's a pity that they chose Bugnam of Gojoseon to fight against the Japanese Empire. That's not right. No matter what, Bugnam of Gojoseon took care of the Japanese Empire for the good of the people. Xianxia wasn't very far from the sea. They were lucky enough to see the appearance of the Japanese bandits a few times. Although the Japanese didn't dare to really attack Beiming with their military strength at that time, they could still attack the periphery. After all, their navy was stronger than Beiming. It could be said that many of the people of Xianxia had suffered losses at the hands of the pirates. Now that they heard that Bugnam of Gojoseon had completely taken care of them, how could they not be happy? Discussions rose and fell like this. Some things that they did not know before were explained by everyone. Most of the people now understood. They also knew that Bugnam of Gojoseon sent out his troops because he was bullied. Furthermore, Bugnam of Gojoseon treated the Han people very well. After a round of discussion, they finally came to a conclusion. First, there was no need to panic. As long as they did not do anything extreme, Bugnam of Gojoseon would not do anything to them. Second, Bugnam of Gojoseon was in urgent need of labor. If anyone had the idea, they could give it a try. Even if they did not get paid in the end, they would only have wasted a day's effort. It was not a big loss. The people did not necessarily know right from wrong. Their knowledge was limited, and they did not care as much about the ownership of the imperial power as those who benefited from it. Just like what the commoners often said, no matter who became the emperor, they would still be them. There would not be any changes. Not to mention a border city like the Twin Cities Guard. It was impossible for the emperor to come here in his lifetime. He had never even seen it, so how could he talk about feelings? What the commoners really cared about was the benefits that they could obtain. Since the 5-star Army's notice said that as long as they worked for them, they would be able to receive money and the remuneration was so high, why not give it a try? Some of the commoners thought so, but others shook their heads and walked away. Since ancient times, it was impossible to take advantage of the royal family while working for them. Not to mention 1 tael of silver a day, even if it was 2 maces of silver a day, it would still be impossible. Would those officials and soldiers be so kind? Slowly, the crowd dispersed. Most of them were returning home, and only a few of them were heading towards the barracks. All of this fell into the eyes of Long Wei, who was observing everything from afar. When Long Wei saw it, the matter naturally reached Yang Chendong's ears, and he laughed heartily in response. Good, it's done. As long as one commoner is willing to try, there won't be any problems. Shang Yang's reform had gained the trust of the commoners by standing on a tree as a sign. Now, without standing on a tree as a sign, the commoners were willing to give it a try. How could it not work? Once they returned home with the silver, presumably the city would explode. Considering that the Twin Cities Guard was too small, Yang Chendong did not arrange for people to guide public opinion. If a stranger suddenly appeared, not only would their words not be believed, but it would also arouse everyone's vigilance. As a result, he let things develop naturally. Even if no one believed what the notice said, he would still use the method of standing on a tree as a sign to gain everyone's trust. Now, it seemed that there were still some daring people who were willing to try. There was no reason for the matter to not work. This was also the reason why Yang Chendong had set the reward so high. It must be known that in a place like the Twin Cities Guard, one tael of silver could do a lot of things. Striking while the iron was hot, and letting the commoners drink with the golden and silver cups, Yang Chendong said to Longwei Badeojiang, "Pass down the order. The soldiers who don't need to be trained will enter the homes of the commoners in the city and chop firewood and water for them. If they can do anything, inform Beta Persei to get some food for them." It was now the 3rd month of spring. In the south, it was already spring and flowers were blooming, but in the north, especially in the Liaodong region, the weather was still very cold. At night, it was common for the temperature to be 10 degrees below zero. From time to time, there would be heavy snow, as if to tell the commoners that winter was not completely over. For example, at noon today, it snowed. Although it was not very heavy, the streets and the courtyards of the commoners' homes were still covered with a layer of white. This gave the 5-star army a chance to show off. For a time, their figures were everywhere in the city. In the commoners' courtyards, the snow on the streets of the city was quickly swept away, revealing the originally black ground. At night, the commoners who had worked hard for most of the day walked out of the barracks with smiles on their faces. They did not show the slightest bit of exhaustion from working hard for the day. After working for most of the day, many of them had less than 1 tael of silver in their hands. This was because they did not work for a day. If they went early in the morning, they would definitely be able to earn 1 tael of silver. More importantly, working in the barracks, they were even provided with lunch. Although it was not very nutritious, just being able to fill their stomachs was enough. This already made them very satisfied. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was like New Year's. These commoners who had received benefits had already decided that they would go to the barracks to work tomorrow morning. Not only that, they would also call their friends to go with them. Everyone should earn money together. Just like this, when these people returned home, the city became lively again. When the white taels of silver were placed in front of everyone, their previous disbelief was swept away. Some people even regretted that they did not give it a try today. Of course, most of them had already decided that they would go to the barracks tomorrow morning. Not to mention 1 tael of silver a day. Even half a tael a day was an extremely good thing. Since ancient times, there had been many ways to buy people's hearts, but there were not many that were as simple and straightforward as Yang Chendong's. History had already proven that as long as you were good to the commoners, they would recognize you. It was not impossible for them to even work for you. Just like now, the soldiers worked for the commoners, and the commoners worked for the barracks. In turn, they also received money. Who would object? The Twin City Guards, who had originally been somewhat nervous because of the city being occupied, quickly calmed down. Not only did they restore their previous order, but everyone was still beaming with joy. They were not affected at all by the fact that winter had not yet left and the weather was still cold. Their smiles seemed to be able to melt the snow. Taking down the Twin City Guards was only the first step in Yang Chendong's military operation to occupy the entire Liaodong region. Next, his gaze fell on the Yima River Guards in the northeast. It was still the same. Song Yong took the lead and came at night. As long as the city gate was opened, everything would be much simpler. All of this was thanks to the Great Ming's official hierarchy. In front of a superior, a lower official generally did not have any authority to speak. As the commander of 50,000 naval troops, Song Yong's position in the military was not low. At least in the entire Liaodong region, there were very few people who could be higher than him. With him going out to open the city gate, it was always successful. The army was at the front, followed by 30,000 North Korean soldiers. Behind them, the commoners of Twin City drove carriages and were responsible for logistics. This reduced the pressure on the army, allowing them to fight forward wholeheartedly. They did not have to think about other things at all. Naturally, they were able to do things with twice the result with half the effort. Yang Chendong's plan went very smoothly. The new army, Su He, did not hold them back. As soon as they appeared, they quickly took down the defenseless Ajulan guards and Tun guards. Then, they went straight for the Fuyu guards. There was no such thing as an airtight pants. Although the new army's movements were very fast, because of the heavy snow, the war horses could not display their usual strength. In the end, a portion of the enemy managed to escape. Then, the news spread. The nearby guards finally knew that the five-star army had appeared in the Liaodong region. When the commander of the Jianghu left guards, Chen Dula, received the news that the five-star army had appeared in the Liaodong region, he turned pale with fright. This was a sudden situation that he did not expect at all. He ordered people to ask for help from the Beiming Imperial court while he began to prepare his troops for war. The former Zhenzhou left guards had been taught a good lesson by Yang Chendong. The former commander Liang Xian and the former commander Tang Longtian had both died at the hands of the five-star army. Naturally he, who had suffered a loss before, was cautious and prepared for battle. He knew the valiant fighting strength of the five-star army, and had seen it more than once. Chen Dula still had lingering fear in his heart. He was even considering whether or not it was better to directly defend the city. However, the newly appointed commander Tong Long did not think this way. Just by hearing his name, Tong Long knew that he was not a Han person. Instead, he was a combination of the Nuzan clan and Han people. Because of his bloodline, he had shown that he was good at fighting since he was young. After he grew up, he worked hard to perform well. In addition to his family's support, he finally obtained the position of Commander Tong Long. This was a secondary grade 3 military official. Furthermore, Tong Long was still young, not even 30 years old. It could be said that his future was limitless. However, the bad thing was that the position of an official in the Great Ming Dynasty depended on seniority. So what if you were capable? Being young was your biggest weakness. Unless you could make a great contribution, you would have to wait if you wanted to be promoted. Some people could even wait for a few years, a decade, or a lifetime. Of course, the young Tong Long did not want to wait any longer. He urgently needed to prove himself. Originally, he was thinking about whether or not he should sign up for the Liaodong Iron Cavalry. After all, that army was now unhindered in the grassland. It was said that even the powerful five-star army was suppressed in the first city, and did not dare to move. An army like this was the place where hot-blooded soldiers like him could realize their ambitions. However, before he could make any decision, the five-star army actually appeared in the Liaodong region. Chapter 1137. According to the official information, the five-star army should be at war with the Japanese Empire right now. Why would they appear here? It was a little puzzling. However, Tong Long didn't care that much. He only knew that his opportunity to perform had arrived. After receiving the news, Tong Long first went to look for Commander Chen Dula and took the initiative to ask for a battle. Unfortunately, he was directly rejected. The reason given by Chen Dula was that it wasn't the right time to send troops because they couldn't figure out the actual situation of the five-star army. Tong Long walked out of Chen Dula's mansion with an unhappy expression and went home angrily. The Tong family's status in the Nuzan tribe was very high. In a place like the Zhenzhou left guard, there was basically nothing that they couldn't do once they wanted to do something. Tong Long used the reason that Chen Dula wanted to suppress him and didn't want him to be promoted as an excuse to ask his family to step forward and put pressure on him. The commander didn't know about this. He was still looking at the map in his study room and worrying. Honestly speaking, Chen Dula really didn't have the intention to suppress Tong Long. Stopping him from sending troops was really for Tong Long's sake. He had dealt with the five-star army before and knew how powerful they were. He still remembered how overbearing the five-star army was when they wanted to open up a transportation route from here. The army was waiting outside for the nearby guards to attack, but no matter who went, didn't they not gain the slightest advantage? Such a powerful opponent wasn't someone that could be easily defeated. Without absolute confidence, it was best to bide one's time and preserve one's strength. The kind-hearted Chen Dula wanted to preserve his strength. However, the Tong family's strength was really too great. In the afternoon, the influential people in the city came one after another to put pressure on him. These people had a certain amount of prestige in the city. If it was only one or two of them, he wouldn't be afraid. However, with so many of them coming together, even the commander couldn't handle it. He had no choice but to agree to Tong Long's request to send troops. However, he stated that he could only bring 2,000 troops and wanted to test the opponent's strength first. Commander Chen Dula only gave 2,000 cavalrymen, but Tong Long didn't think much of it. In his opinion, quality was more important than quantity. Therefore, he gladly accepted it. He also used his family's connections to find the men of the Nuzan tribe and gathered another 1,000 men. He even gave them war horses. In this way, 3,000 cavalrymen was already a strong force. After preparing for a day with 3,000 cavalrymen, Tong Long left Jian Province's left guard city on the third day and headed north. He wanted to find the five-star army and give them a head-on blow. He wanted to let them know that there was still a fierce general like him in Liaodong. The last few times the five-star army appeared here, Tong Long wasn't there. Instead, he was sent by his family to Beiming to study Confucianism. The Nuzhen tribe had good foresight. They knew what it meant to learn from others' strengths to make up for their weaknesses. They also knew what it meant to do as the Romans did. If they wanted to live more comfortably under the rule of the great Ming dynasty and have more power, they had to learn what they liked. It was precisely because he wasn't in Liaodong at that time that all the things about the five-star army were just legends. As the saying goes, seeing is believing. Naturally, Tong Long wasn't afraid of anyone. What he didn't know was that from the moment he walked out of Jian Province's left guard city with 3,000 cavalrymen, his every move was under the eyes of the 1st Cavalry Division. After Tian, who received the order from Yang Chendong, he immediately sent out scouts to watch every Beiming guard city in this area. For a big city like Jian Province's left guard city, its geographical location was so crucial and important. Of course, they wouldn't miss it. There were more than 10 scouts outside the city. They were responsible for watching the 4 city gates. Once they made a move, they could immediately report it to the division headquarters. When Tong Long came out with 3,000 cavalrymen, such a mighty formation naturally couldn't escape the eyes of those who were observant. The news was quickly sent to the division commander, Tian Hu. At the foot of an unknown mountain, the division headquarters of the 1st Cavalry Division was built here. What was different from the past was that this time, the mission they received was to stop the enemy. This required them to remain still. Only when they saw the enemy move out would they be able to go out and fight. Therefore, the world's 1st Cavalry Division, which had always been roaming around, had built a temporary division headquarters. It was rare for them to rest and also be used for command. When the news came that 3,000 Beiming cavalrymen had walked out of Jian Province's left guard city, Tian, who came to the prepared sand table and asked the division headquarters staff officer, "Which regiment is the closest to Jian Province's left guard city?" "Division commander. The 4th regiment is stationed nearby." The staff officer, who knew the division's situation like the back of his hand, gave the answer immediately. When Tian Hu heard this, he nodded his head in satisfaction and ordered, "Give the order to Commander Bai Shuang of the 4th Regiment. Tell him to take down this cavalry and make the formation bigger. Let the other guards see that our 5-star army is not to be trifled with." Bai Shuang, who was born in the Beiming capital's Yang Family Academy, was one of Yang Chendong's favorite students. He was chosen by Yang Chendong because of his proficiency in both civil and martial arts. After a period of training in the army, he was transferred to the 1st Cavalry Division as the commander of the 4th Regiment. Although he was Yang Chendong's student, he was still too young. Many people didn't understand why he was appointed. There were many battle sequences in the 5-star army. If it was just for promotion, then he could have gone to any army. Why did he have to go to the world's 1st Cavalry Division? One had to know that this was the cavalry that could fight the best. They could go to the front lines at any time and fight the enemy with their lives. In this kind of army, if one didn't have real strength, relying on one's background wouldn't work. Bai Shuang still came and became the commander. At that time, many people didn't think well of this matter. However, when he started to carry out his duties as the commander, Bai Shuang's performance blinded many people. Not only did he perfectly complete the tasks given by the division headquarters in every battle, but he also did it at a very small cost. Just like that, the 4th Regiment commander Bai Shuang was accepted by everyone and became the backbone of the 1st Cavalry Division. Now that the 1st Cavalry Division's first battle in the Liaodong region was handed over to Bai Shuang, who was proficient in both civil and martial arts, Tian Hu was completely at ease. Now, he just had to wait for the other party to report back. Soon, the order was sent to Bai Shuang through the scouts. When he saw the military order, he immediately ordered the 4th Regiment to gather. At the same time, he sent out scouts to find out the movements of the 3,000 enemy cavalry and the situation of the commander. Yang Chendong had said more than once that only by knowing yourself and the enemy could you fight every battle well. He also said that the commander of an army was extremely important. He often represented the character and fighting strength of an army. If done well, a fierce tiger leading a group of mountain goats could even defeat a group of tigers led by a mountain goat. Tactically, the enemy was valued. Strategically, the enemy was despised. It was about making all the necessary preparations before a battle. Even if the battle was a battle that one was completely confident in, one must still make all the necessary preparations. Only in this way could one achieve the goal of winning every battle and obtain the greatest victory with the smallest cost. Bai Shuang, who admired Yang Qindong very much, naturally regarded these words as the truth. In fact, he had always done this. Before every battle, he would do his best to understand the situation of the opponent. He would understand the opponent's identity, background, and personal strength, including their strengths and weaknesses, etc. It was because of this that he was able to quickly gain the recognition of everyone and become the commander of the 4th Regiment, commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. Fortunately, Xianxia's intelligence network was very complete. They had done detailed investigations on all the famous people. Therefore, it was not difficult to understand them. Just like when Tong Long led his troops out of the city, some of his information was also sent to Bai Shuang. The scouts who rushed back from the front sent over the information regarding Tong Long. There were a total of 3 pages, so Bai Shuang had a better understanding of his opponent. I didn't expect him to be such a talent. Not only is his strength extraordinary, but he also obtained good results when he was studying in the capital of Baiming. There are actually so many people who admire him. After reading Tong Long's information, Bai Shuang could not help but sigh. The introduction in the information was very detailed. Because of this, Bai Shuang felt a sense of admiration. It would be a waste if such a talent was not only used by his teacher. Didn't Yang Qindong always say that it was easy to obtain 1,000 soldiers, but difficult to find a general? Now that such a suitable person had appeared in front of him, if he did not capture him alive, wouldn't it be a waste? Men, bring me the map. After Bai Shuang had a plan, he made a decision in his heart. Tong Long did not know anything about his situation. As the opponent, the 5-star army had already grasped everything. He was currently leading 3,000 cavalrymen and galloping around. He wanted to find the main force of the 5-star army and then have a decisive battle with them. No one knew the strength of these 3,000 people better than him. Not to mention the 2,000 cavalrymen given by Commander Chen Dula, their general strength was not bad. For example, the 1,000 Nuzan cavalrymen that were summoned in the end. Which one of them was not proficient in riding a horse? An army like this should be qualified to join the Liaodong Iron Cavalry. Right now they were only fighting against the 5-star army. He really could not think of any possibility of failure. This was the most elite of the Nuzan cavalrymen. Riding on a tall horse, he continuously galloped for 4 hours. Only when the war horse was a bit tired did he stop and let everyone rest for a while. But what he didn't expect was that just as he stopped and didn't give the order to rest, a group of black crows suddenly appeared on the hillside in front of him. Then, a group of 5-star soldiers also appeared in his line of sight. Look, is that the 5-star army's cavalry? A sharp-eyed person shouted. It seems that they don't have a lot of people. It seems that there are only 300 to 400 of them. An experienced veteran directly shouted out the number of the enemy's forces. Chapter 1138. There was no doubt that the 5-star army was a 5-star army, and they only had 300 to 400 soldiers. At this moment, how could Tong Long be courteous? Joy flashed across his eyes and he shouted loudly, "Brothers, our chance to make a contribution is here. Charge with me. Charge." The 3,000 cavalry shouted at the same time. Their momentum was extremely shocking. When the iron hooves stomped on the ground, the earth trembled. The 3,000 cavalrymen that rushed over attracted the attention of the hundreds of 5-star soldiers that appeared on the hillside. When they saw the enemy charging over menacingly, they only hesitated for a few breaths before turning around and fleeing. It was obvious that they could see that the strength of both sides was not equal. Under such circumstances, it was not a wise decision to fight. Just like this, one side ran in front while the other chased from behind. The two sides chased after each other. One side desperately tried to escape from the misfortune of being caught while the other desperately tried to make a contribution. On this piece of land, more than 6 hours had passed as they chased after each other. The sky gradually darkened. The 3,000 cavalry from Liaodong were tired after running for an entire day. Seeing that the distance between them and the enemy hadn't closed by a bit, many people advised Tong Long to rest. The general idea was that since they couldn't catch up, it was better to have a good rest. Their brothers were too tired. Although Tong Long really wanted to establish this merit, he was also clear that it would be very difficult to achieve his goal by chasing after them like this. Although he was a bit unhappy, his rationality won over his emotions. In the end, he gave the order for the army to rest. However, he didn't give up and arranged for a few dozen scouts to continue the chase. He believed that if he was tired, the 5-star army wouldn't be any better. This idea was not wrong. When Tong Long and the others had just rested for less than an hour, the scouts rushed back and said that the 5-star corps that they were chasing had stopped after seeing that there was no one chasing after them. They were resting on the main road that was 10 miles ahead. They really are tired. Hearing the scouts' report, Tong Long immediately became spirited. He immediately ordered everyone to stop resting and chase after the enemy. They had only rested for a short period of time. Many people only had the opportunity to drink some water and eat some dry rations. They hadn't officially rested yet. However, no one dared to disobey Tong Long's orders. All of them fell into the trap and continued on their way under the guidance of the scouts. After running for 5 kilometers, they saw a wide, flat road in front of them. Several hundred 5-star army soldiers were resting. It was a pity that their appearance had the effect of startling the enemy. When the two sides were still 4 miles apart, the 5-star army began to flee once again. Chase! Tong Long didn't want to give up just like that, so he continued to spur his horse. Just like that, after a day of rushing, the chase continued for an entire night. Both sides didn't stop to rest, but as a result, their spirits dropped quite a bit. The sky began to brighten, and the 5-star army could be seen more clearly. However, they were still 4 li away, and it was truly hopeless. General, let's take a break. If we continue to chase like this, I'm afraid we'll never be able to catch up. One of the Baihu who sensed that his warhorse's fur was soaked through couldn't help but speak up. With someone taking the lead, very quickly, more and more voices echoed out. Tong Long, who knew that the law couldn't punish too many people, hesitated for a moment. He was prepared to give the order to stop the chase and take a good rest. However, at this moment, another Baihu suddenly shouted, "Look, their speed seems to have slowed down. It seems like they can't hold on any longer." "Ah, is that so?" It seems like it." "Yes, I can see it too. Their speed seems to have slowed down quite a bit." "Haha, compared to our riding skills, it seems like they're still lacking." At this moment, all sorts of discussions began to spread. This was equivalent to giving Tong Long a shot of confidence. He immediately laughed and said, "Good, victory is right in front of us. We can't give up. Now is the time to compete with our willpower. Whoever can persevere the most, victory will belong to them. Everyone, charge with me." Another chase began. Just as everyone wished, the distance between the two sides increased from 4 li to 3 li. At the closest point, it was almost 2 li. If it wasn't for the fact that the 5-star army knew that once they were caught, they would definitely be dead, and had unleashed their potential several times to increase their speed, they would have been caught by now. After a day and a night, it was another day. It wasn't until the afternoon when the sun was about to set that the chasing group arrived at the side of a large mountain. At this point, no matter if they were running or chasing, they had all given it their all. If it wasn't for that trace of willpower still causing trouble, everyone would have stopped long ago. Even so, half of the 3,000 Liaodong cavalrymen had already slowed down. Some of them were even swaying on their horses. It seemed like they would fall asleep as soon as the order to rest was given. Talk, talk, talk. Talk, talk, talk. Under the setting sun, the sound of armored horses galloping could be heard from the quiet mountain, causing snowflakes to fall from the branches of the trees on the mountain. When Tong Long saw all of this, he turned pale with fright. This kind of sound, this kind of effect, it must be a new cavalry group. If it was his allies, then it would be fine. But if it was the 5-star army, then they would really be in danger. If there were more of them, then these 3,000 people would be thrown here. Sometimes the more one was afraid of something, the more likely it would happen. Just as Tong Long placed his hopes on the sudden arrival of the cavalry, the bright red flag of the 5-star army appeared. There were at least 1,000 of them, and they were neat and orderly in formation. With one look, one could tell that they were an iron army that had been honing their strength for a long time. Needless to say, they were the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division's 4th Regiment. Even the 400 cavalrymen that had been running before were part of them. When they saw the main force arrive, the 5th Battalion commander who was in charge of luring the enemy chuckled. He stood at attention at the front of the group and said, "Reporting to Regiment Commander, the 5th Battalion successfully completed the mission of sneaking away from the enemy." They said sneaking away from the enemy and not luring them. This in itself already showed that they did it on purpose. Very good. The 5th Battalion will record this merit. Now go and rest. Leave everything to the other 4 battalions. Bai Shuang said happily. No, please approve. Our 5th Battalion can still fight. Even if our combat strength is weaker, we still have the stamina to capture prisoners. The 5th Battalion commander chuckled and requested to participate in the battle. Approved. You guys will be in charge of the periphery. Clean up the battlefield later. Bai Shuang also laughed out loud as he spoke. Then, he turned around and gave the order. The 4 battalions behind him formed an arrow formation. If everyone was full of energy, Tong Long would still have some confidence in fighting against 2,000 with 3,000. But now, they were exhausted. After running for 2 days and 1 night, they did not even have 2 hours of rest. At this moment, they were afraid that they could not even use 20% of their usual strength. How could they talk about winning the battle? The appearance of the 5-star army caused Tong Long's expression to change drastically. The cavalrymen behind him were all panting with ugly expressions. Get ready, charge. Bai Shuang didn't give them any time to rest. Perhaps this was originally an unfair battle, but this was the result of his plan. It must be said that it was also a part of his strength. If he had to blame someone, he could only blame Tong Long for being too greedy. He always wanted to gain merit. The 4 battalions, totaling 1,600 cavalrymen of the 1st Cavalry Division, charged forward. They were either wielding a saber in one hand and a shield in the other, or wielding a saber in both hands. Just like this, with unstoppable momentum, they charged toward the enemy. By the time they formed several dozen arrow-tipped formations and fiercely pierced into the 3,000 Liaodong cavalry, victory or defeat was already decided. Even if they were in their peak condition, they wouldn't be able to gain any advantage. Now that their strength was less than 20%, how could they fight this battle? Facing the charge of the 1st Cavalry Division, a lot of people wanted to raise their blades to meet them. They could even see the direction of the blades clearly. But because of their lack of strength, they were able to display their weak side in a head-on clash. Some of these cavalrymen who should have been able to fight for a few rounds were knocked off their horses. Some of them fought for 2 rounds, but they were also knocked to the ground because of their lack of strength. Tong Long was worthy of being called a valiant general. Even if he didn't sleep for 2 days and 1 night, and didn't even have a good drink of water, when he really faced the enemy, he still showed his valiant side. Even when he was surrounded by 4 soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division, he was still able to fight evenly. Tong Long's performance was seen by Bai Shuang. He couldn't help but nod his head. It was rare for the Baiming army to have such a tough general, so he didn't have any plans to give up. This kind of talent must be used by the 6th young master. Get out of the way. I'll fight him. Bai Shuang was itching to fight. Most importantly, he was afraid that his soldiers would really hurt Tong Long, so he personally rode over and stood in front of Tong Long. At this moment, Tong Long was panting heavily. Although he didn't lose in the battle just now, he was actually just using up his strength. He couldn't hold on for long. But his pride still made him persevere. Even when facing Bai Shuang, who was also extraordinary, he didn't show any fear. Who are you? Tell me your name. I don't kill nameless generals. Bai Shuang, who was wearing a black cloak, didn't immediately answer Tong Long's question. Instead, he first looked him up and down, then nodded slightly. Not bad. You have a good temperament. Teacher should like you. This kind of question and answer angered Tong Long. He was an existence that could call the wind and summon the rain in the Jian province left guard. Who would dare to look at him like this? It was as if they were admiring an object. This also made him very angry as he said, "Who are you? Tell me your name and I will not kill you." Chapter 1139. All right, my name is Bai Shuang. I am the commander of the 4th Regiment of the 1st Cavalry Division. If you surrender now, you can still live. Otherwise, I'm afraid that this day next year will be the anniversary of your death. Bai Shuang did as the other party wished and reported his name. Then, he looked at the other party with interest. If this person surrendered now, although he could still live, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. Tong Long, who was already somewhat exhausted, would naturally not be frightened by Bai Shuang's words. His expression was cold as he said, "Stop talking nonsense. How can a man surrender to others? If you have the ability, then kill me. If you don't, then be killed by me. Take this." Tong Long knew that his stamina could not hold on for much longer. If he did not make a move now, the longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. After knowing Bai Shuang's name, he immediately made his move. Tong Long was using an extremely sharp saber that looked a little like the weapon used by the Mongolian cavalry when they were roaming the world. It was polished until it shone brightly. When he swung it in the air, because it was fast enough, it actually brought about streaks of white saber intent, gaining the upper hand by a show of strength. Just now, Tong Long had used this kind of fearless blade aura to force the 4 elite soldiers of the 1st Heavenly Cavalry Division to be unable to gain the slightest advantage. Bai Shuang used a red cherry blossom spear that was about 2 meters long. The spear technique was passed down from a spear master. After his own research and continuous training, it finally became a unique technique. The spear technique was strong and heavy, but also slightly agile and tricky. With this set of skills, it was difficult to find an opponent in the entire division. Only the division commander Tian who could defeat him with the full strength of his twin blades. In weapons, there was a saying that the longer the weapon, the stronger the weapon, and the shorter the weapon, the more dangerous it was. If Tong Long was at his peak, he would be able to exchange dozens of blows with Bai Shuang. It would be difficult to determine the victor. However, right now, he had used up 80% of his strength. How could he be a match for Bai Shuang who was using his full strength? After exchanging 2 blows, the scimitar fell to the ground. The third blow, the long spear smacked Tong Long's back, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood and fall to the ground. Tong Long fell to the ground and fainted. Immediately, other soldiers came forward and tied him up tightly. Looking at the opponent that he had knocked out, Bai Shuang nodded lightly. Even though they had only exchanged 2 moves, he could still feel that his opponent's strength was not ordinary and his moves were sharp. Call the medics over and take a good look at him. We can't let anything happen to him. When Bai Shuang knocked Tong Long to the ground and looked up at the battlefield, the battle was basically over. Apart from a few people who were still resisting, most of the Liaodong cavalry had fallen off their horses. Some had even knelt down and surrendered. It wasn't that he didn't want to fight, but that he couldn't. Under the conditions of hunger and cold, it was already not easy to ride a horse. If they wanted to fight with a sword, especially when facing a strong opponent, they would not have a good ending. Those who did not want to die simply chose to surrender. 2,000 people against 3,000 people, and only a few dozen of them were injured. None of them died. Looking at the opponent, almost 100 of them were killed, and the rest were all captured. Not a single one escaped. Even their general was captured. This was definitely a great victory. Commander, although the opponent this time is strong, if we fight them head-on, we won't be afraid of them. We will definitely win. Seeing that the situation was settled, the commander of the 1st Battalion came in front of Bai Shuang and said unhappily, "What? Do you feel that winning like this isn't fair enough? Let me tell you, on the battlefield, as long as you can defeat your opponent, it's fine. As for what method to use, it depends on the benevolent and the wise. If it's possible, it's best to win without fighting. Do you understand?" "No." The commander of the 1st Battalion who was about to refute suddenly heard Bai Shuang say, "That's right, what I said just now was taught to me by my teacher." "No, wrong, well said." Once he heard that it was Yang Chendong who said it, the commander of the 1st Battalion did not dare to refute. The commander of the 1st Battalion could still give some opinions to the commander, but in front of Yang Chendong, the creator of Xianxia, who was like a god of war, he did not have the slightest intention to refute. He knew that the commander of the 1st Battalion would have such a reaction. Bai Shuang laughed in his heart and waved his hand. "Clean up the battlefield well. Take away everything that can be used. Don't leave anything behind." Just like that, Tong Long was captured. Tian who purposely got someone to spread the news after he found out about the outcome, as if to shock everyone. In an instant, the nearby city guards all knew about it. When they heard that even a fierce general like Tong Long was taken care of by the 5-star army, and that not a single one of the 3,000 cavalry came back to report. Everyone was terrified of the 5-star army. The people who originally wanted to send out troops to try their luck all stopped moving and stayed in their own cities like cowards. In this period of time, the news of the 5-star army entering Liaodong had been sent to the northern Ming capital in the form of an urgent dispatch. They had just taken down the two cities of Shaojing and Jingzhou and were thinking of expanding their gains and uprooting Yang Qindong's forces in the grasslands. Suddenly, this news was sent to the imperial court and immediately attracted the attention of countless people. Even Emperor Zhu Qiyu was confused. What's going on? Shouldn't Bugnam of Gojoseon be fighting with great General Ashikaga Yoshimasa in the Japanese Empire? For this reason, he had sent Song Yong and 50,000 naval troops to help. How long had it been since the battle ended? How did Bugnam of Gojoseon appear in Liaodong? What's going on? And what about the 50,000 naval troops he had sent out? Where were they now? Why was there no news of them? Could it be that they had been destroyed by Bugnam of Gojoseon? That was 50,000 people and they were at sea. It wasn't that easy to wipe them all out. Why wasn't there a single warship that reported the news? Countless questions appeared in Zhu Qiyu's mind. This unexpected situation disrupted Zhu Qiyu's plans. Because Shaojing and Jingzhou had been peacefully taken back and he had obtained the 5-star army, Zhu Qiyu was filled with confidence. Who said that Bugnam of Gojoseon was invincible? Didn't he win? Since that was the case, of course, he would continue to work hard to take down Shur City and uproot the 5-star army's forces in the grassland. This idea was quickly approved by the other king of the grassland, Yes Hen. On the grassland, Yes Hen was really afraid of the 5-star army. At least, every battle ended with his defeat. If he could destroy the 5-star army and replace it with Baiming, it would be great. He believed that it wouldn't be long before he could still be a king. Therefore, Zhu Qiyu didn't have to spend much effort to reach an alliance with Yes Hen. The two sides agreed that one side would send out 400,000 troops, and the other side would send out 200,000 troops. They would definitely take down Shur City with high walls and drive Xianxia's forces out of this area. Both sides were mobilizing their troops. After all, it involved an army of 600,000. Just the preparation of food and drink would take some time, not to mention the military supplies. Unexpectedly, something happened in Liaodong so quickly. If it was in the past, Zhu Qiyu wouldn't panic even if Liaodong's predecessor, Nuergendusi, was attacked. After all, it was a bitter and cold place in his opinion. Other than being able to ensure the safety of the northern territory, it had no other use. However, it was different now. He had 70,000 Liaodong cavalrymen. They had now become the most elite existence in the Baiming army. They could even scare off the 5-star army. How could such a powerful army, the headquarters of such a powerful army, a place where countless brave warriors could be produced, how could they just watch as it was lost? He couldn't lose Liaodong, and he couldn't let Yang Qindong use this opportunity to open a supply route. Zhu Qiyu immediately ordered a court meeting. He wanted to gather all the officials to discuss a solution to the problem. For this court assembly, in order to achieve the effect of everyone working together, Zhu Qiyu specially allowed all 4th-ranked officials and above to participate. The same went for 4th-ranked generals. In order to maintain balance in the Great Ming Dynasty, the status of the generals was usually not very high. Most of them were even regarded as boorish. Sometimes, even a 2nd-rank general's status was not as high as a 4th-rank civil official's. Usually, during the court meeting, there were even fewer opportunities for the generals to participate. This time, Zhu Qiyu intended to raise the status of the generals. From this point alone, it could be seen that Zhu Qiyu was really anxious. The expansion of the court assembly this time had indeed attracted many officials to participate. Just looking down from the dragon throne, it was a sea of black crows and crows. There were more than 200 people. Looking at so many officials below the stage, Zhu Qiyu smiled and breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't believe that with so many talented people, he wouldn't be able to defeat a small Bugnam of Gojoseon. In his joy, Zhu Qiyu looked at Ji Ning, who was standing to the side, and nodded. The court meeting began. There was no need to talk about the topic. Those who were able to appear here naturally knew what was going on. Thus, from the beginning of the court meeting, there were officials who continuously gave suggestions. Each and every one of them spoke endlessly, as if each of them had thousands of ideas in their hearts. However, if one were to listen carefully, they would discover that most of their words were flattering Zhu Qiyu and flattering her. The general idea was that although the king was strong, how could he dare to face the emperor? As long as the army marched into the Liaodong region, the so-called Wunan Wang, the so-called five-star army, would flee as soon as they heard the news. They would surrender without a fight. At first, Zhu Qiyu was in a good mood. However, the more he listened, the more he found that this wasn't the case. More than an hour had passed, and no one had really come up with any ideas. They were all just saying nice things. Seeing that more and more people would have this opinion if he didn't stop them, Zhu Qiyu couldn't help but cough lightly. Then he said, "Everyone, we naturally know that a small bug nom of Gojosian is not to be feared. However, according to your suggestions, how many people should be sent this time, and who should be the commander?" When it came to the specific questions, the noisy court immediately quieted down. Chapter 1140. Most of the people who could come here were civil officials. They either relied on their writings, or relied on their family's influence to get to their positions. Some even relied on some shady means to get to their positions. But no matter how they entered the court, most of them had a common characteristic, and that was that they could speak but not act. It was undeniable that Confucianism could indeed teach people to be good and change the wildness in a person's heart. There were also other benefits. But the drawbacks were equally obvious. Some things were too rule-abiding. After a long time, they would become complacent. It was like moving their mouths and talking. They dared to comment on anything. Some of them even dared to criticize the emperor. But when it came to practical matters, they really couldn't do it. This didn't mean that they didn't have the ability, but because when two sides fought, the other side wouldn't listen to you. If there was a disagreement, they would draw their swords. This wasn't something that these scholars who studied Confucianism could compare to. It was important for people to know their own limits. If they knew that they couldn't do something, but still insisted on standing up, then it wasn't taking responsibility, but showing off. To put it bluntly, it was no different from courting death. It was just like the Tumu Fortress incident back then. How many civil officials of northern Ming had died? Among them, there were many who were truly talented. However, in the face of the ferocious Walla cavalry, were their eloquent tongues really of any use? No. After the previous incident, the imperial court was much quieter this time. For a time, Zhu Qiyu, who was originally full of hope, suddenly had an ugly expression. Just now, when everyone was talking so excitedly, he thought that they had already thought of a countermeasure. But now, it seemed that this wasn't the case at all. His gaze swept past the civil official group and naturally landed on the military general group, which had very few people. When it came to specific matters, especially when it came to leading troops to war, it still depended on the generals. But what made Zhu Qiyu a little disappointed was that even these generals who practiced martial arts didn't take the initiative to stand up at this moment. Instead, they all lowered their heads and pondered about something, as if there was something valuable under their feet that was worth attracting. The great Ming dynasty had a long history of valuing literature and despising the military. It wasn't something that could be changed overnight. Although because of the changes in the political situation, the status of the generals had increased, but there was still a big gap between the two sides. Let's use a simple example. What is the most important thing in a war? Some people might talk about the morale of the soldiers, some would talk about the bravery of the generals, some would talk about whether this was a battle of justice, and some would talk about the right time, the right place, the right people, and so on. But the real key was logistics. In other words, it referred to the supply of food, fodder, and weapons. Think about it. If an army that was capable of fighting did not have food to eat and only had wooden sticks in their hands, how could they fight the enemy? How could they use their teeth to bite the enemy? Tear it apart with your bare hands? Thus, there was a saying that war was a war for money. It just so happened that the logistics of the army were decided by the civil officials. This was equivalent to having one's Achilles heel pressed down. Even if one wanted to fight alone, one couldn't. How could one win a battle in such a situation? Just like the 70,000 Liaodong cavalry. Why did they develop so quickly? Why were they so elite that even the five-star army in Origin City was afraid of them? It was nothing more than that they had enough autonomy. They could harvest grain and grass on the grassland like the Mongolian cavalry. They could snatch good things when they saw them, which made them stronger and stronger. It was impossible to send troops to Liaodong without any taboos. It could be imagined that no matter who led the troops, the logistics would be fought over. This involved a lot of benefits. Whoever had the advantage would get countless benefits from it. Once the war was won, these people would not only get the benefits, but they would also get the credit. If they were defeated, it would have nothing to do with them. The responsibility would all fall on the generals who led the troops. With this comparison, it was no wonder that the generals were not willing to stand up and take the responsibility that originally belonged to them. Not to mention, the opponent of this battle was Bugnam of Gojoseon. This person had the title of the god of war. How could he be so easy to deal with? The generals were all silent. Zhu Qiyu was a little angry. Before he could say anything, the civil officials at the side had already launched an attack. Perhaps they also felt that the contrast between just now and now was too big. They were afraid that the emperor would vent his anger on them. Therefore, they were ruthless and as unpleasant as they could be. What's wrong? Aren't you generals? Your duty is to go to the battlefield and kill the enemy. Even if you die on the battlefield, you won't hesitate. This is your destiny. That's right. Isn't it your duty to send troops to war? Why are you afraid of death now? None of you dare to accept the challenge. It's really disappointing. No wonder Bugnam of Gojoseon is so arrogant. It's all because of you useless people. You useless things. You really don't know what to do. You really make people look down on you. Yes, it's too disappointing. The Imperial court spent so much money to feed you. The criticism came one after another. It was as if they couldn't show their righteousness if they didn't step on them. In just a short while, the generals' faces were as red as a monkey's buttocks. Some of the more thin-skinned ones wanted to find a hole to hide in. This was really like the saying, "Those who enjoy the show are not afraid of things getting out of hand." Faced with the criticism of the entire civil officials, a general called Li Tong finally couldn't take it anymore. As a second-grade general in the Imperial court, he naturally had his own personal pride. Especially now that the status of a general was rising step by step, he was very optimistic about the future. More than once, he had told the other generals in private that spring was coming for the generals. But now, before he could achieve his goal, he was being slandered in such a way. He was really angry. When he saw that the other generals and colleagues were all evasive and didn't even dare to fart in front of the civil officials, he angrily stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, this subject is willing to lead the army, but I have a request." Finally, someone was willing to take the initiative to step forward. Naturally, Zhu Qiyu was overjoyed. When he looked at the person, even his gaze became much friendlier. "Oh, General Li, I don't know what request you have. Why don't you tell me? I hope that the matter of the provisions will be managed by the officials I've chosen." In this way, Li Tong boldly made his request. Just as he was about to continue speaking, he didn't expect that the civil officials had already exploded. How is this possible? This is against the rules. Then, won't everything be decided by you generals? Once you have disloyal thoughts, how can you control it? Absolutely not. If something really happens, it will be a big matter. It will be much more dangerous than the matter in Liaodong. Yes, we absolutely can't agree. The discussion rose again, followed by a group attack. Li Tong, who wasn't good with words, was instantly drowned in a sea of verbal attacks. This time, not only would the civil officials not agree, but even Emperor Zhu Qiyu wouldn't agree. As an emperor, as a monarch, how could he control his army? Wasn't it shown by eating, drinking, and defecating? If he gave the generals too much power, who knew if it would spur some people's ambitions and cause them to do something unfavorable to him? If that was the case, then he would suffer a great loss. No emperor would agree to such a dangerous matter, let alone Zhu Qiyu, who had forcefully taken the throne. Perhaps it was because he didn't take the right path when he took the throne, so he was very afraid that someone would threaten him. It was even more impossible for him to agree to Li Tong's request. Shaking his head, Zhu Qiyu said with an unquestionable tone, "General Li, you've heard everyone's reaction. We absolutely can't agree to this matter." Zhu Qiyu's words set the tone for the matter. Li Tong knew that it was useless to say more. However, since he had already stepped out, it was impossible for him to retreat. He could only cup his hands and say, "Since it's like this, everything will be decided by your Majesty." This subject will only be responsible for leading the troops to fight. Li Tong was forced to accept the challenge. In a situation where no other general stepped out, Zhu Qiyu finally appointed him as the general leading the troops. He took 200,000 soldiers, 50,000 of which were veterans and 150,000 of which were new recruits. He ordered them to prepare within 7 days and send troops to support Liaodong. As if to ease Li Tong's heart, Zhu Qiyu especially said during the court meeting that no matter who was in charge of logistics and provisions, they couldn't make things difficult for General Li and had to do their best to cooperate. The officials naturally agreed, but no one knew what would happen. Su Yozhen, the Crown Prince's junior tutor, Grand Scholar and Minister of Justice, didn't say anything from beginning to end. He just watched coldly from the sidelines and sneered in his heart. Before the troops had even been sent out, General Li Tong had already attracted the dissatisfaction of the civil officials. Li Tong could even imagine that it would be strange if he wasn't targeted. If he didn't do this, how could the civil officials vent their anger of being accused of not trusting him? It seemed that the result of this battle had already been decided. Sigh. Could it be that the great Ming's luck was really coming to an end? The Hu estate. Minister of Rights Hu Xiao. Although he still had the title of minister, he hadn't been to court for a while. This was because the relationship between Baiming and Bugnam of Gojoseon had changed greatly. This made his position as Yang Qindong's father-in-law very awkward. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble and to avoid being targeted, Hu Xiao was sick and stayed at home. Not only that, but the other members of the Hu family were also ordered to stay at home and not go out. They had to be as low-key as possible. Chapter 1141. Although he had not left his room, he was still able to receive news of what had happened in the imperial court. Hu Xiao had been the Minister of Rights for many years, and his students were spread all over the world. He naturally had many sources of information. It was precisely because he knew what had happened in the imperial court that Hu Xiao, who was with his son in his study, fell into deep thought. Hu Zhongning also knew what had happened in the imperial court, and he was much more nervous than his father. Father, the emperor is about to move against Chendong. Will we be implicated? How about I go find the 5-star army in the city? There's no need for that. It's not time yet. Hu Xiao slowly opened his eyes, a faint smile on his lips. It was clear that everything was under his control. Son, don't think that we'll be in danger if we really start fighting. It's said that even when 2 armies fight, they don't kill the envoys. But father. Seeing that Hu Zhongning was about to say something, Hu Xiao waved his hand and said, Relax. Since Zhu Qiyu was able to become emperor, he's not so foolish. He's keenly aware that before he destroys Bugnam of Gojoseon, he won't be able to touch us. Otherwise, he doesn't even know what the consequences will be. On the contrary, the more victories Bugnam of Gojoseon wins on the front lines, the more apprehensive the emperor will be. Unless it's time for a life-and-death struggle, as long as we don't stir up trouble, nothing will happen. The older the ginger, the spicier it was. Hu Xiao was so confident not only because of his thorough analysis of the situation and his deep understanding of Zhu Qiyu's personality, but also because of 2 other reasons. First, Su Yozhen was in the imperial court. If something really did happen, he would definitely inform him. Second, Baiming had Yang Qindong's brothers and sisters in the capital. If even they were fine, how could he possibly be in danger? With these 2 reasons, Hu Xiao was naturally brimming with confidence. On the contrary, he was now worried about whether Yang Qindong could stop Baiming's army. If Yang Qindong was seriously injured, or even destroyed, then as his in-laws, they would be seen as accomplices. That would be the real danger. Not to mention that the Hu mansion was as calm as water. Yang Qindong, who was running amok in Liaodong, had telegraphed everything that happened there to him. Looking at the telegram sent by Wang Shan, Yang Qindong chuckled and said, 200,000? Aren't they looking down on our 5-star army too much? After a brief evaluation, Yang Qindong put it aside. Obviously, he had already predicted that Baiming would send troops, so he wasn't surprised by what he had expected. His main focus was now on the next territory to be conquered, Golin Wei. Ever since Yang Qindong brought Langxi Shifu to the northern part of Liaodong, everything went smoothly. Besieging a city was as easy as entering an uninhabited land. In addition, the surrender General Song Yong played a big role. Just like the previous Xishan guards, they didn't even fire a shot. Song Yong entered the city first to persuade them to surrender and occupied the city. More than 1,000 Ming soldiers and tens of thousands of great Ming people were included in Xianxia's territory. This time, to deal with Gu Linwei, Yang Qindong used the same trick. Song Yong volunteered to go first, and once they occupied the city, it was tantamount to opening the southwest gate of Nuagon Du Si's headquarters. They weren't far from their goal. Young Master, Hai Si Shifu sent a telegram. They have entered Kuwu Island, Sakhalin Island in the future, along the waterway. After a fierce battle, they successfully occupied it. Beta Persei brought a telegram that he had just received to Yang Qindong's temporary tent. Good. When he heard the news, Yang Qindong couldn't help but laugh heartily. Kuwu Island was occupied, which meant that Commander Song Quan had no way to retreat on the sea. He had to either fight with him or surrender. There was no third choice. As if confirming the saying, good things come in pairs, not long after, Song Yong also rushed back. Along with him was Gu Linwei's Grand Qian Huzhe. Obviously, he had been persuaded, and this time, he was here to surrender. Similarly, it didn't take much effort to capture Gu Linwei. Yang Qindong was one step closer to achieving his goal of capturing Liaodong. Very good. Song Yong did well. Tell him that he will be heavily rewarded. When we completely capture Tuagon Du Si's headquarters, we will definitely reward him. Yang Qindong said with a smile. Although Song Yong was a surrendered general and his ability to fight was not very good, his eloquence was not bad. He was also a talent. Yang Qindong had already thought about it. After the war, he would send him to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He should be able to play a big role. After Gu Linwei was taken down, the next target would be the Fushan Guards, which was the Turlinwei Guards headquarters. Once they took down this place, they would be able to directly face the highest level of power in the Liaodong region. If they could take down this place without shedding any blood, it would be perfect. Beta Persei passed the message to Song Yong. Song Yong was naturally excited. He originally thought that he was just a surrendered general and would never have the chance to raise his head in this life. He didn't expect that he would be able to enter the eyes of Bugnam of Gojoseon. Thinking about his future, he decided to continue to make contributions. So after returning to the barracks to rest for a night, he continued to rush forward and went straight to Tuagon Du Si's headquarters. Yang Qindong led the army through Gu Linwei early the next morning. At this time, it was already May. The weather was getting warmer and warmer. After the snow melted, the speed of the army's advance was also a lot faster. 2 days later, Song Yong sent news that Tuagon Du Si's headquarters was already empty. Whether it was the soldiers or the people in the headquarters, they had all disappeared. They should have all gathered in Tuagon Du Si's headquarters. So Song Yong directly went to Tuagon Du Si's headquarters in the Liaodong region. Another 5 days passed. When Yang Qindong led the army to Tuagon Du Si's headquarters, bad news came. The cavalry scouts reported that Song Yong's head was hung on the city wall of Tuagon Du Si's headquarters. As soon as the news reached Yang Qindong's ears, he was shocked and furious. Although Song Yong was a surrendered general, he was now representing the 5-star army. As the saying goes, envoys should not be killed in a war. Song Yong was killed just like that. This was clearly a slap to the 5-star army's face. It was a slap to the Bugnam of Gojoseon's face. Young master, Song Yong can't die just like that. This is clearly looking down on our 5-star army. Let's fight. Beta Persei's eyes were shining as he spoke. Along the way, he originally thought that there would be a big battle to fight. This was the time to show off his skills. He didn't expect things to go so smoothly. Originally, he thought that Tuagon Du Si would surrender. Although he would be happy, he didn't go to the battlefield after all. But now, Song Yong was killed. This was clearly a demonstration by the Baiming generals of Tuagon Du Si. If he didn't kill this trend, who would take the 5-star army seriously in the future? Yang Qindong didn't answer immediately. Although Song Yong's death made him very angry, he couldn't solve the problem by being impulsive. The most important thing now was to understand the situation in Tuagon Du Si. Only by understanding the other party's background would he be able to come up with the best strategy. Beta Persei, contact the intelligence personnel in Tuagon Du Si immediately. I want to know how many Biming army there are here and who killed Song Yong. Yes, young master. Beta Persei nodded and turned to leave. Yang Chendong's eyes were cold and angry. Someone actually dared to kill one of his men, and an envoy at that. He had to admit that some people were really bold. Since that was the case, he didn't mind being ruthless and using some cruel means to tell the world what would happen if they didn't follow the rules. The intelligence department acted very quickly. Yang San, the head of the security bureau, had already arranged a lot of people here, so the situation in the city quickly spread out. According to a centurion bribed by the security bureau, Song Yong's death was caused by Zhong Cheng, the commander of the city. The telegram described the whole process of Song Yong's death in detail. Originally, as an envoy, Song Yong could have left the city safely if he failed to persuade them to surrender. As the commander, Song Quan also had the same idea. Although he didn't like his own family and thought that they had no backbone, he would still abide by the rules of war between two armies. Things went bad because of Zhong Cheng. He didn't know where he found out that Song Yong had 100,000 taels of silver on him. This was originally given to him by Yang Chendong. If he succeeded in persuading Song Yong to surrender, this would be their way of expressing their sincerity. Logically speaking, if they didn't reach an agreement, Song Yong should have left the city and wouldn't have handed over the 100,000 taels of silver. But the greedy Zhong Cheng didn't care about this. He thought that since they were going to become enemies, it would be a waste if he didn't take the 100,000 taels. So he led the soldiers to stop Song Yong at the city gate and asked him to hand over the banknotes. Otherwise he would die. After Song Yong was chosen by Yang Chendong, his whole person changed. He had a bright future, so of course he wouldn't hand over the banknotes and show his incompetence again. Considering that he was an envoy of the 5-star army, not only did he not hand over the banknotes, he also loudly reprimanded Zhong Cheng, making the soldiers at the city gate hear clearly. Being reprimanded in public like this, Zhong Cheng's face naturally didn't look good. In a rage, he swung his sword and chopped Song Quan. Naturally, the 100,000 taels of silver also fell into Zhong Cheng's pocket. This matter was seen by many people, so Zhong Cheng deliberately said that this was the fate of those who dared to surrender to the 5-star army. You're courting death. Yang Chendong's face was full of anger. He punched the sand table that was temporarily set up. With just one punch, the solid wood table was completely destroyed. Young master, calm down. This Zhong Cheng really deserves to die. The intelligence department also sent news that this person's reputation in the city isn't good, especially his greed and lust. That's known by everyone. Just counting the number of concubines, he has taken as many as 13 and even gave birth to 3 fat sons for him. His eldest son is already 12 years old and is now running amok in the city. I heard that he's even worse than his father. Beta Persei also said with a face full of anger. Chapter 1142. Humph, they're all in cahoots, Yang Chendong said angrily. Young master, the Zhong family is one of the biggest merchants in the Biming capital. They've taken quite a lot of goods from our commerce department and earned quite a bit of money. Do you want to deal with his family? We'll let them know the consequences of not following the rules of the 5-star army, Beta Persei said when he saw that the young master's anger had yet to dissipate. People always said that one shouldn't bring trouble to one's family. Yang Chendong naturally wouldn't casually bring trouble to Zhong Cheng's family. But since his 12-year-old son was a bad person, it was normal to get rid of him according to the rules. As for the Zhong family, sorry, but they'll be removed from the list of merchants in the future. I'll take note of this. After we take down Terran City, we'll still have to hold a trial. At that time, we'll let the people decide. If Zhong Cheng really didn't teach his son well, it's better to get rid of him as soon as possible. Yang Chendong didn't say it explicitly, but he didn't object. This was enough to explain everything. Dealing with Zhong Cheng would have to wait until they took down Terran City. The most important thing now was how to take down the city. According to the intelligence department, in order to prepare for the arrival of the 5-star army, the commander had gathered some of the nearby guards in Terran City. In addition to the original soldiers in the city, the Biming army now had close to 100,000 people. It was truly a powerful force. On the other hand, Yang Chendong only had 8,000 elite soldiers from the 4th Infantry Division, 20,000 North Korean C-rank soldiers, and the Northern Ming Guards who had come all the way to Long, which added up to about 10,000. Altogether, there were no more than 40,000 people. 40,000 against 100,000, and it was the main attack. This was basically impossible in the eyes of others, but in Yang Chendong's eyes, it was a completely different matter. The reason why he brought the 4th Division and not the other cavalry troops was to attack the city. Now, it seemed that he had to use it. Inform the commander to prepare to attack the city. Inform the other troops to prepare to assist in the attack. Inform the 4th Division of the Sea to be on standby and prepare to bombard Terran City. Yang Chendong gave out orders one after another. Since they didn't have enough troops and the enemy still wanted to defend, it was impossible to solve the problem peacefully. They might as well use the most powerful firearms. Even though it would inevitably cause some unnecessary casualties, it was better than losing their own men and losing their own soldiers. Ling Dechong was very excited when he received the order. Ever since he entered the Liaodong region, he had been looking for a chance to show off his skills. From the telegram, he found out that both the 1st Cavalry Division and the new army had done a lot. Only his 4th Division hadn't done anything. All they did was follow the 6th Young Master and take over some of the cities that Song Yong had occupied. This made him feel very unbalanced. To be able to follow the 6th Young Master, it was the perfect opportunity to show off his skills. Now that he didn't do anything, it would be a lie to say that he didn't feel wronged at all. Even in his dreams, he wanted to show off the strength of the 4th Division. He originally thought that Song Yong had gone to Terran City and that he wouldn't have a chance. Now, the Liaodong army dared to kill Song Yong, who was in the middle of a peace negotiation. This angered the 6th Young Master. Now, it was time for them to show off. Gather the entire division and prepare for battle. Tell the 4 regimental commanders to report to me. After Ling Dechong finished speaking, he laughed heartily and went to the sand table to plan the attack. Within Terran City, Commanding Officer Song Quan sat in the main hall with a dignified expression. Beside him sat Commander Zhong Cheng and Commander Chen Shi Yiligong. Commanding Officer Song Quan was a Grade 2 general. To be able to reach this position, Song Quan was quite capable. Furthermore, from the fact that he hadn't moved from his position for 7 years, it could be seen that he was a smooth and slick person. The Great Ming Dynasty valued the civil and despised the military. This was especially so for the generals who held great power. It was very easy for the emperor to be suspicious of them. Reality also proved that if it wasn't for the emperor's suspicion and the civil officials' jealousy, the Great Ming Dynasty wouldn't have been destroyed. As a commanding officer of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, Song Quan was able to sit in his position for 7 years. This was enough to show that he was very good at dealing with people. Otherwise, he would have been suppressed to death by the civil officials. It was because of this that when he heard that the 5-star Army's peace envoy, Song Yong, had died at the city gates, his face instantly darkened. His position meant that he couldn't surrender to Yang Chendong. Unless there was an order from the Baiming Emperor, if he really did so, none of his family members in the Baiming capital would be able to survive. However, he didn't make this decision of his own accord. As a general who held great power in the military, Song Quan had a deep understanding of the 5-star army. It was because of this that he knew how powerful the other party was. This kind of enemy wasn't someone he could fight against. He couldn't surrender, and he couldn't win. Song Quan was prepared to sacrifice himself for a righteous cause to protect his family in the capital. Therefore, in the face of Song Yong's words, all he could do was to drive the other party away and wait for Yang Chendong to fight. When the time was right, he would commit suicide. With his own life, he could exchange the safety of his whole family, or he could also protect the safety of the people in the city. But he didn't expect Zhong Cheng to be so daring as to force Song Yong to kill out of greed. This would create a situation where only one side would be able to survive. When the time came, even if he died, the civilians in the city wouldn't have it easy either. Did this Zhong Cheng not have a brain? Did he not know that once the 5-star army took Terran City, all the money he had would be nothing more than a wedding dress for the enemy? What was the use of money that couldn't be taken, and even if it was taken, it was useless. But it was too late to say anything now. Song Yong was already dead, and the dead couldn't be brought back to life. What they had to do now was to solve the current problem and save as many people as possible with the least amount of casualties. Looking at Zhong Cheng with a murderous gaze, Song Quan said, "General Zhong, Song Yong is already dead. The 5-star army will be attacking the city soon. Why don't you take the lead?" Why should I? Zhong Cheng's expression turned ugly. From the moment Song Yong died, he knew that things were going to go south. He didn't think that someone would risk his life for money. If he had known, he wouldn't have done such a thing even if he was beaten to death. But since he was already dead, there was no point in thinking about it. Thinking about the 100,000 soldiers in the city and the less than 50,000 five-star army outside the city, he regained his courage. But now, the commander was asking him to fight the five-star army. Wasn't that the same as asking him to die? He wasn't stupid enough to agree to it. Everyone knew that it was easy to gain merits by being the vanguard, but it was also very dangerous. Perhaps if it was another ambitious general, he would fight for this position. But as a member of the Zhong clan in the capital, he had an incomparable background. He came to the Liaodong region just to gain experience. He didn't need such a great merit. Only then did he refuse without even thinking about it. Sitting on the right was the commander, Yi Ligong. He was a handsome middle-aged man in his early 30s. To be able to reach this position and become a rank 3 general, it wasn't because he had a powerful background. Instead, he relied on his own efforts to get to where he was today. It could be said that whether it was in terms of intelligence or bravery, he was one of the top 5 people in the Liaodong region. Yi Ligong, who could be called an all-rounder, knew his fate the moment he heard the guards say that Zhong Cheng had killed Song Yong at the city gates. He was so angry that he called Zhong Cheng a stupid pig. Just watch, because this person is likely to bury all of us in the city. Even on the battlefield, killing a general of the 5-star army wasn't a big deal. In a battle between 2 armies, who wouldn't die? But killing an unarmed envoy was completely different. That was openly breaking the rules and slapping Bugnam of Gojoseon's face. Who was Bugnam of Gojoseon? He was in existence on par with the southern and Beiming emperors. In terms of territory, he wasn't much worse. He was just someone with a lower reputation. How could such a person be so easy to provoke? Who was Zhong Cheng? His family had some reputation in the capital and he had made some money in the past few years. Did he really think that he was invincible and could do whatever he wanted? Did he think that he could kill people without following the rules? From that moment on, Yi Ligong had sentenced Zhong Cheng to death. And now, Zhong Cheng was openly disobeying the commander's orders. Yi Ligong didn't know what to say about this person. It seemed that the word stupid wasn't enough to describe him. Sure enough, as soon as Zhong Cheng refused, Song Quan flew into a rage. General Zhong, do you think I'm negotiating with you? Let me tell you, this is a military order. If you don't obey, you will be punished according to military law. The so-called punishment according to military law was beheading. Zhong Cheng, who felt that things were not going well, pointed at Song Quan and said, "Commander, you can't do this. Over the years, our Zhong family has given you a lot of money. Shut up. If you dare to mess around, you will be slapped 30 times, Song Quan said angrily. That's right. Over the years, he had been able to secure his position because he had given a lot of money to the higher-ups. He had no choice but to do so. If he hadn't done so, he would have been schemed against by others. Among them, the Zhong family had paid a lot of money. If it was in the past, even if it was because of this, he would not do anything to Zhong Cheng. But now, seeing that Tren City was about to fall and he was about to die, how could he still be threatened by Zhong Cheng? Chapter 1143. Zhong Cheng finally shut his mouth after hearing Song Quan's 30 slaps. He could tell that Song Quan was going to abandon him. Now that he was under someone else's roof, he had no choice but to lower his head. He thought to himself that when he had the chance to spread the news, he would definitely tell his family about this. After that, he could only reluctantly agree. Since Commander has given the order, Zhong Cheng will follow it. I will go and arrange for people to defend the city. Zhong Cheng walked out of the hall, leaving Song Quan and Yi Ligong behind. Thinking about the unfavorable situation, Song Quan asked, Commander, I'm afraid that Zhong Cheng alone won't be able to stop the 5-star army's attack. I heard that the 4th Infantry Division is mainly armed with firearms. Yes, how could I not know that I can't stop them? But do we have a choice? Song Quan slowly opened his eyes and said with a sigh. Then, as if he thought of something, he looked at Yi Ligong and said, You are different from me. You are an orphan, your parents are long gone, and your wife is newly married. She is currently in Terran City. The court doesn't have any evidence against you, so you don't have to die like you. With your ability, even if you join the 5-star army, you will have a bright future. Lord Commander, I've never had such thoughts. Yi Ligong hurriedly explained. Song Quan interrupted him and said, all these years, how could I not know what kind of person you are? It's just that there is no need to make unnecessary sacrifices. Moreover, Bugnam of Gojoseon is indeed a dragon among men. I know that he is very good to the Han people, so he should be good to the Han generals as well. With him, the Han people's status will be higher and their lives will be better. Isn't this what we want to see? Sigh, if it wasn't for my family, I would also consider joining the 5-star army and fight for Bugnam of Gojoseon, fighting for the Han people's future. Yi Ligong would never have thought that Song Quan would be the one to say such heartfelt words. For a moment, he was stunned and didn't know what to say. Just like what Song Quan said, Yi Ligong had a good impression of the 5-star army. Especially after learning about their deeds from various intelligence reports, he admired them even more. However, due to his identity and faction, he had no choice but to hide it in his heart. Now, the choice was right in front of him. He had gone from being a bystander to being in the situation. It would be a lie to say that Yi Ligong did not have any ideas about where to go from here. However, when he thought about how everything he had today was all because of Song Quan's recommendation, he could not let down this benefactor in his life. And now, it was this noble person who was advising him to surrender to the enemy. His heart, which had been suppressed, began to stir again. Yi Ligong did not immediately object, which was equivalent to expressing his attitude. How could Song Quan not know? He continued, Ligong, it's not that I don't have any selfish motives. You know, my family is in the capital. When I'm around, naturally, no one dares to bully them. However, once I leave, it's hard to say. If one day, and I'm saying if, you have a firm foothold among the 5 stars, please help my family if possible. This is also my last request to you. Commander, please don't say that. If I can survive this time, your family will be my family, and your parents will be my parents. Yi Ligong immediately swore. Good, good. Song Quan patted Yi Ligong's shoulder with a gratified expression. The last worry in his life had been removed, and he could finally go without worry. Outside the city, Ling Dechong called the 4 commanders under him over and seriously discussed the plan to attack the city. It wasn't easy to get a chance to attack, and everyone's opinion was surprisingly unanimous. They were not in a hurry to attack the city. First, they would scare the enemy and let them know that sometimes, it wasn't easy to die even if they wanted to. 4 hours later, after the 4th Lu Division was fully prepared to attack the city, the first gunshot rang out. With the Type 95 firearms that could easily fire from 300 to 400 meters away, when the gunshots rang out, the Ming soldiers guarding Terran City became live targets. Many of them even had bows and arrows in their hands as they stuck their heads out of the battlements, waiting for the 5-star army to come closer. Bullets flew over and accurately hit their bodies. This was simply an unfair and unequal battle. One side could attack as they pleased, while the other side could only passively take a beating. They couldn't even see the appearance of their opponents clearly, but hundreds of Ming soldiers were hit. Some died on the spot, while others were injured by gunshots and fell to the ground screaming in pain. If they died, then so be it, everything would be over. But those who were injured by gunshots, when their cries of pain rang out from the battlements, the shock it brought to their comrades was so great that it completely exceeded the expectations of the defending general, Zhong Cheng. He originally thought that with the advantage of numbers, they would be able to fight evenly with the 5-star army. In addition, they had the higher ground and were relying on the city walls, so it wasn't impossible for them to push back the 5-star army. But after this exchange, Zhong Cheng realized how wrong he was. As the headquarters of the new Ergon Du Si, it was where the commander was located. Bei Shi also placed great importance on it, and once sent people to send over 200 firearms. They had always been treated as treasures and kept in the armory. This time, Zhong Cheng even took them out, wanting to properly display their power. But after this exchange, these seemingly treasured firearms were completely useless, unable to pose any threat to the 5-star army. They couldn't even attack from a certain distance, so how could they display their power? Zhong Cheng, who was on top of the city gate tower, saw that more and more soldiers were dying and the number of injured was increasing. The soldiers guarding the city were terrified because of this. More and more soldiers hid behind the city gate tower and didn't even dare to show their heads. Xianxia couldn't help but be furious. He loudly ordered everyone to shoot arrows outside the city. Since the general had given the order, the soldiers below didn't dare to disobey. Helpless, they could only risk their lives and shoot arrows outside. But very quickly, those who showed their heads didn't have a good ending. Out of 10 people, at least half of them were hit or injured, and the remaining half had their arrows shot to God knows where, unable to pose any threat to the outside world. Under the constant orders, the number of injured and dead increased, and the morale of the Baiming army continued to drop. Having completely lost the initiative, the Baiming army could only take a beating and hide. Outside of Terran City, the fourth Master Lu's attack shocked everyone. Behind them, the 20,000 North Korean soldiers who were preparing to attack, as well as the 10,000 Baiming soldiers who surrendered along the way, were also shocked. They originally thought that with the enemy's high walls and the commander personally leading the attack, this attack would be extremely difficult, and who knew how many lives would be lost here. This was especially true for the Baiming soldiers who had surrendered. Thinking about how they had just escaped from the tiger's den and into the wolf's den, they felt extremely uncomfortable. But who would have thought that when the attack started, the situation would be one-sided? The Terran City Baiming soldiers, who had the advantage in numbers, didn't even have the ability to retaliate. When this scene fell into everyone's eyes, many of the soldiers were extremely excited. The situation on the battlefield was completely out of their expectations, and it gave them hope, a chance to perform meritorious deeds. General, the North Korean soldiers and the Baiming army who surrendered are asking if we can attack the city now. Ling Dechong was still smiling as he watched his soldiers flaunt their might when the messenger walked over and reported. There's no rush, there's no rush. Ling Dechong waved his hand and laughed. Tell them that it's not time for them to attack yet. Let's fight for a while longer and completely destroy their morale. That's when we'll be able to win this battle. Ha ha ha. Ling Dechong was very familiar with his weapons, and he was even more familiar with the power of his weapons. He knew that if he wanted to obtain the greatest victory with the smallest price, he couldn't rush it. In any case, he had brought a lot of bullets with him this time, so he treated it as giving the soldiers a chance to shoot. They didn't charge, and bullets continued to fly. 4 hours later, the sky turned dark and everything became quiet. More and more injured soldiers were carried down from the city walls. Cries of pain and anguish could be heard everywhere. When the Baiming soldiers who hadn't entered the battlefield heard this, their faces turned pale and their expressions changed greatly. Facing an enemy who could easily kill you from a distance without even facing you head-on, they didn't have much of a chance of winning. They all thought in their hearts, if it were them, how much confidence would they have in winning? The commanding general, Xianxia, also had a dejected look on his face. He originally thought that with his advantages, he would be able to fight on par with the 5-star army. If things went well, he would be able to defeat them. That would be an outstanding military achievement. Who would have thought that the result would be like this? After fighting for 4 hours, they couldn't even touch the corner of their opponent's clothes. He only got the result of more than 300 soldiers being killed and more than 1,000 injured. Of course, what was worse was that the morale of the soldiers had been greatly damaged. If this continued tomorrow, he really didn't dare to imagine how the army would be able to continue fighting if they didn't have any combat power. General Zhong, the commander has ordered you to come to his residence to discuss military matters. One of Song Quan's soldiers came in front of Zhong Cheng. I understand. Zhong Cheng nodded expressionlessly. Lead the way. In fact, Zhong Cheng was prepared to go to Song Quan even without him coming to find him. There was no way to fight a war like this, and there was no way to win it. He wanted to resign from his position as the general of the city defense. The commander's residence was brightly lit at this moment. When Zhong Cheng arrived, he saw a busy scene. He saw many people walking in and out, and they were carrying all kinds of things in their hands. It felt like they were moving house. Zhong Cheng, who didn't understand what was going on, strode into the main hall and saw Song Quan and the commander, Yiligong, sitting there. Chapter 1144. Commander, what are the people outside busy with? Zhong Cheng asked in confusion after entering the hall. General Zhong, don't ask so many questions. Let me ask you, what are your thoughts after today's battle with the 5-star army? Do you think we can defend Tren City with just us? Song Quan didn't answer Zhong Cheng's question. Instead, he took the initiative to ask about the battle. Sigh. At the mention of this matter, Zhong Cheng's face was ashen as he said, "Don't mention it. The firearms in the hands of the 5-star army are simply too powerful. They can even shoot from afar and are extremely accurate. We didn't even see their shadows and we've already lost over 1,000 people. If this battle continues like this, there's really no way to continue." "Oh, so that means we won't be able to defend the city?" Song Quan asked again. "That's right. We can't defend it." This time, Zhong Qing answered honestly. If that's the case, what does General Zhong think about breaking out of the encirclement?" Song Quan asked as he already expected Zhong Cheng to say this. Breaking out of the encirclement? This question was completely out of Zhong Cheng's expectations. Then, he remembered that when he entered the mansion, he saw those people moving things back and forth. He immediately understood that Song Quan was preparing to escape. Seeing that Zhong Cheng seemed to be thinking about something, Song Quan looked at Yi Ligong on the other side. The two of them looked at each other and nodded. Song Quan said to Zhong Cheng again, "That's right, we should break out of the encirclement. You know the situation this afternoon. The 5-star army has very powerful firearms. It's not something we can stop. If we don't break out of the encirclement early, once they attack with this method, I'm afraid we won't even have a chance." "Yes, Commander, you're right. But isn't it too rushed to break out of the encirclement tonight?" After seeing the power of the 5-star army, Zhong Cheng agreed with this decision. However, he still felt that breaking out of the encirclement now was too rushed. He didn't even have the slightest bit of preparation. It's not rushed. Who can guarantee that the 5-star army won't attack the city tomorrow? If that's the case, I'm afraid we won't even have a chance to break through. Seeing that Zhong Cheng didn't immediately object, Song Quan continued to persuade him. The 5-star army was indeed powerful. No one knew what kind of attack they would launch tomorrow. In the end, Zhong Cheng nodded and agreed. "Let's break through the encirclement then. I just don't know what kind of plan the commander has. I've already discussed this matter with Yi Qian. Let's do it like this tonight." In the middle of the night, dark clouds covered the moonlight and the sky was completely dark. Looking at Tellin City from afar, other than the moving torches on the city walls, which were soldiers patrolling, everything else was pitch black. It gave off a very quiet feeling. However, the atmosphere suddenly changed. The originally quiet city was suddenly filled with rumbling sounds. Then, the west gate was opened and a large group of people rushed out. They appeared like a whirlwind and rushed towards the river guards. After the west gate was opened, the south gate opened as well. Unlike the other gates, the south gate remained silent after it was opened. Not a single soldier walked out from it. The contrast between the two was very obvious. Outside the south gate, Yang Chendong, who had already changed into a golden cloak, was slowly approaching under the protection of 1,000 black knights. Behind the black knights were tens of thousands of North Korean soldiers and 10,000 Beiming army soldiers. They arrived at the south gate unhurriedly. Then, they entered as if there was no one around. Just like that, they entered the city through the gate openly. They didn't encounter any obstruction or resistance during the process. In the commander's residence of Tellin City, the commander, Song Quan, had already committed suicide in the courtyard. A white cloth was covering his body and a group of soldiers were kneeling on both sides of him. When Yang Chendong arrived, he saw this scene. "Greetings, Bug Nam of Gojoseon." The moment Yang Chendong entered the courtyard, everyone, led by Yi Ligong, fell to their knees. Sigh, a proper burial. After Beta Persei opened the white cloth and confirmed that the deceased was indeed Song Quan, Yang Chendong sighed emotionally. "Thank you, Bug Nam of Gojoseon." With Yi Ligong as the leader, everyone kowtowed once again. Song Quan died just like that. Perhaps he knew that if he didn't die, his family in Beiming wouldn't be safe, so he sacrificed himself in exchange for everyone's lives. Yi Ligong knew the whole plan. He really wanted to prevent his benefactor from dying, but he also knew that it was useless. Song Quan's survival meant that his family in Beiming had to die. There was no other choice but to sacrifice one person in exchange for everyone's lives. And before Song Quan died, he still did a lot of things. He really needed Yi Ligong to take care of his family in the future. So he first arranged for Zhong Cheng, who was a thorn in his side, to leave the city. Then, he handed over all the military and political power to Yi Ligong, and then died peacefully. After Yi Ligong learned of the plan, he secretly sent someone to contact Yang Chendong. This was how the 5-star army safely entered the city and took over everything. You're Yi Ligong. Let's talk inside. Yang Chendong already knew everything that had happened. He couldn't do anything about Song Quan's choice, but he also admired him. He was full of curiosity about Yi Ligong. What kind of person could make Song Quan sacrifice himself to protect him? Could he really guarantee that Yi Ligong would fulfill his promise after his death? In the main hall of the commander's residence, Pang Yu, Ba Daojiang, and the others, who had transformed into Long Wei, carefully inspected the place. After confirming that there were no problems, Yang Chendong stepped into the hall, followed by Yi Ligong, the commander-in-chief. Yang Chendong sat down on the main seat while Yi Ligong stood with his hands by his side. The two of them sized each other up. In the entire Liaodong region, Yi Ligong was an extremely famous existence. He was different from Tong Long. Although he was extremely courageous, he had relied on the help of his family to get to where he was today. Yi Ligong had relied entirely on himself. He had relied on his ability to wield both the pen and the sword to reach the position of commander-in-chief. For this reason, when the Liaodong cavalry was established, Fang Dingshan had personally appointed him as his deputy, but Song Quan had stopped him in the end. How could such a person not attract Yang Chendong's attention? Originally, he had wanted to see his ability in the Battle of Terran City, but he hadn't expected that the other party would surrender without even putting up a basic resistance. Of course, it was a good thing that he could take the initiative to surrender to him. Subduing the enemy without a fight, this was the highest level of victory in battle. And the person behind all of this was Yi Ligong, so Yang Chendong was naturally very interested in him. Bugnam of Gojoseon, the surrendered general has a request. While Yang Chendong was sizing up the other party, Yi Ligong had already knelt down on the ground again. How dare you? Beta Persei shouted from the side. You're just a surrendered general, what right do you have to make a request? Yes, the surrendered general knows that he's not qualified, but I hope that Bugnam of Gojoseon will agree to this request. Thump, thump, thump. His forehead hit the ground 3 times in a row, and soon blood flowed from his forehead. It was obvious that he had used a lot of strength. Let's hear it. Yang Chendong stretched out his hand to stop Beta Persei's next action and looked at Yi Ligong, who was kneeling on the ground, with interest. Now that he had a chance to speak, Yi Ligong said, Bugnam of Gojoseon, Commander Song committed suicide to save the people of Terran City from the flames of war. If there's a chance one day, please clear his name. Thank you. When he sent a secret envoy to Yang Chendong to beg for surrender, he had said not to make things difficult for the people of Terran City. At that time, Yang Chendong had also agreed. However, he didn't say anything about clearing Song Quan's name. Now that Yi Ligong had suddenly brought it up, even Yang Chendong frowned slightly after hearing it. General Yi, why didn't you mention this when you sent people to beg for surrender? Reporting to Bugnam of Gojoseon, when Commander Song was still here, everything was led by him. There are some things that a surrendered general can't say clearly. The secret envoy in charge of the surrender was arranged by Song Quan. Of course, he wouldn't mention clearing his name after death. In fact, he didn't even think about such a thing. What he cared about was the safety of his family in the capital, and the hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians in Terran City. Since Song Quan didn't mention it, Yi Ligong could not mention it. Now that he had the opportunity to talk to Yang Chendong, he brought it up. Yang Chendong nodded slightly with a look of understanding. Then he looked at the kneeling Yi Ligong and asked with a smile, You want this king to clear Song Quan's name? Aren't you worried that this king will be defeated and killed one day? If that's the case, clearing his name will be meaningless. There was a prerequisite for clearing Song Quan's name, and that was that Yang Chendong could succeed. Otherwise, not only would the matter of clearing his name be a joke, it would also bring great trouble to Song Quan's family. No. Although the surrendered general only lives in a remote corner, he has long heard of the 5-star army's love for the people. A king who cares about the people of the world, how can his future be limited? This surrendered general boldly believes that the world will eventually belong to Bugnam of Gojoseon. Yi Ligong was also smart. He took the opportunity to explain and flatter Yang Chendong. Bootlicker. Beta Persei, who was standing at the side, said softly. How could these words escape the ears of Yang Chendong, who had entered the quasi-grandmaster realm? However, he didn't care. Instead, he chuckled and asked, General Yi, you said that this king cares about the people in his heart. Are the Beiming Emperor and the Southern Ming Emperor not the same? It's not the same. Yi Ligong shook his head. If he was still the Beiming commandant, there were some things that he couldn't say even if he thought about it. Otherwise, it would be a choice and it would be treacherous. But now, since he had chosen to surrender to the 5-star army, he naturally didn't have any concerns. Chapter 1145. The Emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty talks about the safety of the people, but in reality, it is only for the stability of the regime. In their eyes, the officials and the major clans of the world are seeking benefits, finding a balance between them, and consolidating the regime. Bugnam of Gojoseon is indeed different. Because of your appearance, the status of the Han people in the world has been raised by more than one level. This can be seen from yesterday when you only besieged the city and did not immediately attack. Based on this point, the surrendered general believes that you are a sincere ruler. After Yi Ligong finished speaking, he once again knelt on the ground, as if he had said all that he should say and would let Yang Chendong deal with him. The words just now were indeed the words of Yi Ligong's trusted aide. But how could it not be a representation? Presumably, in the entire Great Ming Dynasty, there should be many generals with such knowledge. When Yang Chendong heard this, he was naturally gratified. At least there was someone who understood what he did. Good, I have to say, General Yi, your words really made me happy. Since that is the case, I will agree to your request. Once this prince has enough ability, I will definitely clear General Song Quan's name. And as you said, this prince does not want to see the Han people and the Ming army kill each other. There are still many cities in the Liaodong region that have not been captured. I don't know if you can do your part to help this prince? Yang Chendong took a fancy to Yi Ligong's identity as a commander. It would be more convenient for him to do some things than the dead Song Yong. In addition, he intended to test the other party's ability, so he spoke out. The surrendered general is duty-bound. How could Yi Ligong, who wanted to take the opportunity to show his ability, not agree? The surrendered general thanks Bugnam of Gojoseon for promising to clear General Song's name. Thank you again. Thump, 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 he kowtowed 3 more times, and blood overflowed from his forehead. Just as the two were talking, Long Wei's voice came from outside the hall. 6th Young Master, Lu 4th Division Commander Ling Daqiang requests an audience. Let him in. Yang Chendong sat up straight with a smile on his face. After a dozen breaths of time, Ling Daqiang entered the hall with a wooden box in his hands. He knelt down in front of Yang Chendong, who was wearing a golden cloak. 6th Young Master, I was able to accomplish my mission. Zhong Cheng has been killed. This is his head. Poor Zhong Cheng, he didn't even know that he had been betrayed. They thought that Song Quan had really given the order to break out of the encirclement, but unbeknownst to them, not too far away from the southern gates, the Lu 4th Master teachers were already lying in ambush. As soon as they appeared, they would surround them and eliminate them. How could Zhong Cheng know about this? He was still happy that he was about to escape from danger. Following that, gunshots rang out and everything ended. Zhong Cheng was dead. Not only that, but his family members who followed him out of the city didn't end up well either. Most of them were captured, and his evil youngest son was also killed in the chaos. It could be said that they had avenged Song Yong. Yang Chendong didn't look at the head in the wooden box. Instead, he sighed and said, Release the news that Zhong Cheng secretly escaped from the city and created an opportunity for the 5-star army to enter Terran City. After a series of resistance, Yi Ligong was captured and Commander Song Quan died in battle. As soon as Yang Chendong said this, Yi Ligong, who had just stood up, revealed a grateful expression. By pushing all the blame to the dead Zhong Cheng, Song Quan's family members in Beiming capital would be safe. Beta Persei agreed and immediately sent someone to spread the news. Yang Chendong asked Yi Ligong to stay behind and asked him about the Liaodong region. Yi Ligong already had thoughts of joining Yang Chendong, so he naturally told him everything he knew. Bugnam of Gojoseon, before the Liaodong region was renamed as the new Urgon Dusi region, I followed Commander Song Quan here. I don't know everything here, but I know 90% of it. Let's start with the most powerful place, the Jianghu guards. Yi Ligong was indeed worthy of being chosen by Song Quan. He knew the situation here very well. Many of the things he said were the same as the information sent by the intelligence department. There were also some things that even the intelligence department didn't know. Okay. Seeing Yi Ligong stop talking, Yang Chendong laughed heartily and slapped his thigh. It seems that General Yi is indeed very familiar with the situation here. If that's the case, I wonder if you can persuade the nearby guard stations that haven't been taken down by our 5-star army? Yi Ligong didn't immediately answer. Instead, after thinking for a moment, he raised his head. It shouldn't be a problem. If Bugnam of Gojoseon trusts this Yi, then leave this matter to me. Seeing Yi Ligong so confident, Yang Chendong was even more happy. Okay, I'll leave this matter to you. How many soldiers do you need? There's no need. I'll just bring some personal guards. However, I hope that Bugnam of Gojoseon can give me some silver. This isn't to bribe anyone. It's just that some places are too poor. They can't even pay the soldiers. Speaking of this, Yi Ligong felt a bit embarrassed. After all, he was the commander of the Liaodong region. Logically speaking, he was in charge of the finances. If he said that there wasn't any pay for the soldiers, it really was a loss of face. Before coming, Yang Chendong had done his research. Although Zhu Qiyu had indeed earned quite a bit of money through the newly opened Zhu family bank, the lives of the soldiers weren't that good. For example, the Liaodong cavalry on the grasslands were still fine. They could be paid on time. However, the Liaodong region, which was too far away from the capital, couldn't do so. Every time it was time to pay, all sorts of reasons would be used to reduce it. As time passed, the silver became more and more insufficient. Knowing that this wasn't Yi Ligong's fault, Yang Chendong stood up and patted him on the shoulder. This king knows the situation. You don't have to feel burdened. How about this? I'll give you 1 million taels of silver. You can go and solve the problem. Not only the soldiers, but also the common people. You can help them. If it's still not enough, you can come and find this king. He didn't expect Yang Chendong to be so generous and benevolent. 1 million taels of silver was equivalent to half a year's salary for the Liaodong guard post. Yi Ligong patted his chest and promised, Bugnam of Gojoseon, don't worry. The silver will definitely be distributed to the soldiers and the common people. Your righteous deeds will also be known to the common people. Yi Ligong knew very well that Yang Chendong was trying to buy people's hearts. However, he also liked to do this kind of thing. If Zhu Qiyu had been willing to take out silver to buy people's hearts, the Liaodong guard post wouldn't have been so weak. Song Yong wouldn't have been able to convince several guard posts in succession. In the end, it was all because they didn't have money. Terran City was finally taken. The loss of the Liaodong guard post in the north also meant that the plan to invade Liaodong was already half successful. Yang Chendong didn't cheer because of this. He knew that once the news spread, Zhu Qiyu would definitely send reinforcements. If he didn't defeat these people, he would tell the acting emperor that Liaodong was no longer under his control and make him give up. This was the most important thing. The new army was still madly sweeping through the Liaodong guard post. All the guard posts they wanted to attack either surrendered early on or were defeated in the first battle. Except for a few soldiers who had a certain amount of fighting power, most of the guard posts were under their control. With the world's first cavalry division acting as a huge mountain blocking the Xianxia River Guard's front line, it suppressed the northern Ming army from advancing north for a long time. It was only when the northern Ming sent out reinforcements, with General Li Tong at the head of 200,000 troops, that the Liaodong guards were greatly encouraged and saw hope. During this time, Yi Ligong completed the task given to him by Yang Chendong very well. He integrated the guard posts in the Terran City, which included more than 20,000 surrendered soldiers from Baiming. The 100,000 soldiers in the Gatling City, and the 10,000 surrendered soldiers that Yang Chendong brought along made a total of 130,000 soldiers. Yang Chendong naturally wouldn't be polite with such a force. Then he made a shocking decision. He changed the name of the Liaodong guard post to the 3 eastern provinces and used one of his students as the governor, a person named Lu Ji. Although Lu Ji was Yang Chendong's student, he was actually older than Yang Chendong. But in the spirit of learning without precedence, He was still convinced by Yang Chendong's knowledge, entered the Yang family academy, and became an excellent teacher. Because he was very good at management, he was promoted to the position of governor of the 3 eastern provinces. The position of general of the 3 eastern provinces was given to Yi Ligong. Not only that, he was allowed to have 100,000 soldiers, 30,000 of which could be cavalry. When the matter was announced, Yi Ligong, who didn't cry easily, failed to live up to expectations and shed tears. Then he secretly swore in his heart that a gentleman would die for his friend and follow Yang Chendong for the rest of his life. General Yi, I'll leave you with 1,000,000 taels of silver. In the future, you'll be paid on time every month. However, I'll leave the matters of the army to you. You must seize the opportunity to train. You must train a strong army so that General Song Quan can rest assured in the underworld. Yang Chendong said earnestly to Yi Ligong. Bug Nam of Gojoseon, don't worry. We will train hard, but if you call we will come. Yi Ligong solemnly promised. After solving the problem of the Liaodong guard post, Yang Chendong brought the 4th Division, 20,000 North Korean soldiers, and 10,000 Beiming surrendered soldiers down south. In just 4 months after leaving the Japanese Empire, Yang Chendong had taken over the Shuangqing Guards and the Saha River Guards as the front line. He was already halfway to his goal of taking over the Liaodong guard post. However, Yang Chendong was very clear that although it seemed like he had taken over half of the territory, it was just a barren land. There weren't many Beiming army there either. The truly powerful ones were the remaining half, which was the Liaodong guard post near the capital of Beiming. Chapter 1146. But no matter what, the initial goal had been achieved. The new supply line had been opened. He had already sent a telegram to order the Korean province to transport the various supplies that had been hoarded over the past few days by sea. Once the supplies arrived at Shur City on the grasslands, it would be even more difficult for anyone to deal with them. When the news of the supply line being opened reached the northern Ming dynasty's court, Zhu Qiyu, the acting patriarch, was truly anxious. Destroying Yang Chendong's arrangements in the grasslands and even uprooting them was what he had been doing for the past year. If he failed to do so, not only would he have wasted more than a year, but it would also greatly affect the morale of the army. Zhu Qiyu definitely did not want to see such a thing happen. Although he was not fully prepared, he still sent an order to the Beiming commander Shi Hang on the grasslands front line. He ordered the Walla army's troops, Yes Hen, to go to Shur City. No matter what, they had to solve the problem before the 5-star army supplies arrived. At the same time, Zhu Qiyu sent someone to quickly inform General Li Tong, who had already sent troops and was about to reach the Liaodong region. In the face of the 5-star army, they had to win and not lose, even if it was a draw. In short, they had to block the main force of the 5-star army in the Liaodong region so that they could not support Grassland City. The emperor gave orders one after another, and the situation in the Liaodong region became extremely tense. On the grasslands, the war was about to break out, and the situation was even more grim. With Su Yozhen's insider, the news about Zhu Qiyu's plan to attack Shur City was quickly sent over via telegram. After the new army's commander, Tiger's Mane, and the mayor, Yu Mian, discussed, they immediately ordered the entire city to be under martial law and to strictly investigate the identity of the people who had recently arrived. As the person in charge of logistics, Yang Si led the soldiers to start planting mines to block the joint attack of the Beiming army and the Walla cavalry. Compared to the slow telegram, the Beiming commander Shi Hang, who had already occupied Tulu City, only received the news of the emperor's order to send troops on the 4th day. What are you doing? We'll attack immediately. Our army hasn't been fully assembled yet, and our provisions haven't arrived yet. Shi Hang looked at the imperial edict in front of him with dissatisfaction. However, when he saw Zhu Qiyu repeatedly say, urgent at the end of the imperial edict, he knew that there were some things that he could not decide. Forget it. Send out the troops. Order the general at the vanguard to take 20,000 soldiers and leave first. We'll talk about it after we've created some momentum. Shi Hang only did this because he wanted to complete the decree. He wanted to create some momentum to complete his task. However, what he didn't expect was that not long after the vanguard army left Talu City, they were ambushed by a new army before they even reached the beginning city. In just over half a day, the vanguard army was defeated. More than 10,000 people were killed and captured. In the end, Only about 50,000 people managed to escape. After being hit in the head, Shiheng finally calmed down. He knew that in the face of such a powerful opponent like the 5-star army, all kinds of accidents could happen if he was a little careless. Therefore, he suppressed the urge on the Imperial edict and nervously contacted Xianxia, asking him to send troops to cooperate. At the same time, he called back 70,000 Liaodong cavalry and made preparations to attack the beginning city. In the beginning city, the commander of the new army, Tiger's Mane, was cheering for the victory of the first battle. However, after learning about Shiheng's preparations from the intelligence personnel, he didn't dare to be careless. While doing the strict defense of the city, he sent a telegram to Yang Chendong and reported in detail what had happened here. Yang Chendong, who was rushing to the Twin City Guard, didn't look happy at all after seeing the telegram. Instead, his eyebrows were knitted together again. Young master, shouldn't Tiger's Mane be happy after winning the battle? Beta Persei, who was following beside him, noticed the change in Yang Chendong and asked with some confusion. Yes, you should be happy after winning the battle. It's just that this first battle has been won. I'm afraid that the next battle won't be so easy. With this lesson, do you think the Beiming army will still underestimate the enemy? Yang Chendong nodded first, then looked at Beta Persei in a rhetorical manner. Beta Persei didn't know how to answer this question. He could only touch his head and chuckle. It's okay, with Tiger's Mane there won't be any problems in the beginning city. I also believe in Tiger's Mane. There won't be any problems in the short term, but it's hard to say after a long time. So we have to speed up, we can't continue to wait. In this way, order the entire army to speed up. Yang Chendong nodded. Although Tiger's Mane had never complained, Yang Chendong could imagine that after not receiving any supplies for more than a year, even if there were some stocks before, there wouldn't be much left now. Under the order of Yang Chendong, the army once again sped up. Meanwhile, at this time, 200 li southwest of their destination, Twin Cities Guard, Northern Ming's 200,000 reinforcements had already arrived, moreover gathering together with Jian Province's left guard General Chen Do. Since Tong Long was captured with 3,000 cavalry, Chen Dula retreated into his shell like a tortoise and never came out again. Even if he could see the scattered 5-star army's cavalry scouts nearby, he still turned a blind eye to them. It wasn't until he heard that the 200,000 reinforcements sent by the emperor had arrived that he hurriedly left the city and brought some provisions and military supplies out. Speaking of which, Chen Dula and Li Tong were old acquaintances. Although they weren't very close, they could still be considered old friends. When they met again, there was no need to be polite. Perhaps they also knew that they were now grasshoppers on the same rope, and they couldn't run away from each other. General Chen, the situation isn't good. The 5-star army is coming aggressively. I'm afraid it won't be easy to deal with them. After Li Tong greeted Chen Dula, he entered the temporary tent to discuss the situation in front of him. General Li is right. The 5-star army's combat power is strong and not easy to deal with. To be honest, not long ago, my commander knew that Tong Long wasn't convinced, so he rushed out with 3,000 cavalry, and the result? Li Tong, who had been rushing, didn't know what happened to Tong Long, so he asked out of curiosity. Just as the words left his mouth, Li Tong thought of something. Looking at Chen Dula's serious and gloomy expression, he already knew the result, so he could only shake his head. I have to say, the Bugnom of Gojoseon is really not easy to deal with. That's right, they have the world's strongest cavalry, and at the same time, they have the world's most powerful firearms. Most importantly, they seem to have endless wealth, and until now, it's difficult to restrict them with money. When Chen Dula said this, he could only helplessly shake his head. Anyone who had one of these was already very powerful, not to mention all three. With such an opponent, even if you had a lot of troops, you wouldn't be able to gain any advantages. After hearing this, Li Tong was silent for a while, then he raised his head and said, General Chen's words don't necessarily have to boost the morale of others and reduce our own morale. Hehe. Chen Dula knew that Li Tong had seen the seriousness of the situation. The reason why he said this was because Li Tong was the main general, and he needed to boost his morale. That was why he said this. For this reason, he decided to give Li Tong some face and didn't expose him. Instead, he asked, General Li, how are you going to deal with the enemy? Are you going to use these 200,000 people to attack and take back everything that you've lost? No. Li Tong quickly shook his head. The opponent is a cavalry team, and in terms of speed, we are no match for them. It's better to defend. Besides, the Emperor's intention is very clear. He wants us to guard here and stop Bugnam of Gojoseon from assisting the Grasslands beginning city. If we do this well, it will be a great achievement. Li Tong was very clear about his position, which made Chen Dula feel very gratified. General Li is indeed a talented commander. I deeply agree with this. You have to know that Tong Long didn't gain any advantages when he led 3,000 elite cavalry previously. Haha, great minds think alike. Li Tong laughed heartily at the sky after hearing that. Using a defensive battle to hold back Bugnam of Gojoseon's army and prevent them from assisting the beginning city. This was the plan that Li Tong had set for the 200,000 troops. If the truth was really like what he did, it could indeed give Yang Chendong a headache. Although it would definitely not be able to block it, it could play the role of stalling for time. In this way, the beginning city would be in danger. The policy was right, but in the end, it still depended on who carried it out. Just like the laws and governments issued by many countries, they were all for the purpose of the people. However, when it was really in the hands of the people, it might be completely different. Just like now, Tong Long, who they were just talking about, had now returned to the Jian province left guard and met his own people here. In the Jian province left guard, in terms of population, although the Han people were more than the Nuzanren, in terms of overall strength, especially influence, the Nuzanren was not just a little bit stronger. This might have something to do with the Nuzanren being more united than the Han people, or perhaps it was because they had lived in this area for generations, allowing them to adapt better to the environment here. In short, the Nuzanren's influence in the Jian province left guard was far greater than that of the Han people. Even the commander, Chen Do-la, had to act according to her mood. Not to mention that Chen Do-la was not in the city now. It was just a small matter of quietly entering the city, so Tong Long naturally did it. Not only did he enter the city, but he also met his father, Tong Shang, a burly man who was taller than an ordinary person. When Tong Shang was young, he was definitely a person who could tremble with a stomp of his feet in this area. In addition, he had the support of a group of old brothers, so he had done a lot of things. For example, the nearby caravans must pay the toll to them. Otherwise, their safety could not be guaranteed. It was also because Tong Shang did not understand the Han culture. Otherwise, with his economic strength and influence, he would have long become a general among the Baiming generals. In the end, the things that the old man couldn't do were handed over to his son. Fortunately, Tong Long lived up to expectations. With the support of his family, he finally walked to the position of commander and became a secondary grade 3 military officer. Chapter 1147. With Tong Long's good performance, Tong Shang was like a tiger that had grown wings. In the big city of the Zhenzhou left guard, there was no one who dared to not give him face. However, all of this changed when Tong Long and his 3,000 elite cavalrymen suddenly disappeared. Tong Shang and Tong Long were father and son. One was a businessman while the other was an official. When one of them was missing, the problem naturally arose. The cake was only so big, and most of it was still controlled by the Tong family. Now that there was finally a chance to redistribute it, who would give up this opportunity? During this period of time, the Tong family had become the target of public criticism. They had become the target of everyone's attacks, both openly and secretly. Even Chen Dula, as the commander, had begun to take sides, as if he wanted to help another family rise in the city. The Tong clan's days became harder and harder, and they were getting worse day by day. At this moment, Tong Long suddenly appeared in front of his father, which made Tong Sheng extremely excited. "My son, you're back? Haha, that's great. Let's see who dares to make things difficult for our Tong family this time." Tong Sheng, who had always been expressionless, actually had such a reaction after seeing his son. Just from this point alone, one could see how much pressure he had been under during this period of time and how difficult his days had been. "Father, I'm unfilial. I've had a bad start." Tong Long knelt in front of Tong Shang and lowered his proud head. "Don't say that. Victory and defeat are common in war. It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back. How about this? You can immediately go to the Yamen and restore your official position first." Tong Shang knew that Chen Dula was not in the city, So he decided to restore his son's official position first and properly intimidate the other opponents in the open and in the dark. Looking at his father's wrinkled face, Tong Long swallowed his saliva first, then said in a calm voice, "Father, I can't go to the yamen." "Why? Is it because you lost the battle?" "It's fine, didn't I say? Victory and defeat are common in war. Besides, who really won against the 5-star army? It's fine, we can just spend more money." After operating in the Jianghu left guard city for decades, Tong Sheng still had some family assets. Naturally, his words were more forceful. "Money? How much money do we have now?" Speaking of this matter, Tong Long was also very curious. He only knew that the family had some extra money, but he really did not ask how much it was. It wasn't that he was ambitious, but that he didn't have any needs in this aspect. Speaking of this matter, Tong Sheng's face burst out into a smile like a blooming flower. "Son, you've finally grown up. You know how much money we have at home." "Haha, if others ask me like this, I wouldn't tell them. However, I will hand it over to you in the future." "Therefore, I won't hide it from you. Listen, we've saved 300,000 taels of silver. It's not a problem for us to restore your official position with this money." 300,000 taels was undoubtedly an astronomical figure in the eyes of ordinary people. Didn't Zhong Cheng kill Song Yong for 100,000 taels of silver? In the end, he was beheaded and separated from his family. Looking at his father's proud appearance, Tong Long did not feel the slightest bit of joy. Instead, he sighed. His father had worked hard for so many years, and after operating for so many years, he only managed to save 300,000 taels of silver. Yet he was already so happy. He didn't know if he should say that it was a kind of sorrow. In front of his father, Tong Long revealed a calm expression. His right hand slowly reached into his pocket, and then he easily took out 500,000 taels of silver. "Father, what do you think this is?" "Silver." Tong Sheng's eyes weren't blurry and he recognized the item in front of him at first glance. When he took a closer look, he realized that it was Xianxia's 500,000 taels of silver. When he realized that it could be exchanged at any Yang family bank, his eyes widened. "This? Where did this come from?" "Of course it was given to me by the 5-star army. I won't hide it from father. I am now a member of the 5-star army. Because of my outstanding strength and outstanding performance, I am now a company commander. Of course, I am confident that I can lead more troops in the future." When he spoke of this, Tong Long's arrogant side appeared again. Ever since Tong Long was captured by Commander Bai Shuang, he couldn't accept it. When he woke up and ate a large amount of food, he started to shout loudly. What he meant was that he couldn't accept it. If it wasn't for the 5-star army's strategy that caused them to be exhausted, he definitely had the ability to fight it out and even win. Logically speaking, a captive shouldn't have the right to speak. Even in ancient times, such people didn't even have basic human rights. However, Bai Shuang didn't take away his right to shout. On the contrary, he got someone to release him. Not only him, the other 2,000+ captives were also released. They were surrounded by 4 groups of 2,000 soldiers. The only difference was that one group had weapons and war horses while the other group had nothing. What are they doing? Are they trying to kill us? Since that's the case, we will fight it out with them. We don't have any weapons. Even if we bite with our teeth and tear with our hands, we can't just sit there and wait for death. Seeing their 2,000+ men being surrounded by the 5-star army's 2,000 cavalry, many of their faces changed greatly. Some of them were already prepared to fight to the death. It had to be said that although Tong Long lost this time, the soldiers he brought still had some backbone. If it was a normal army, they would have already knelt down and begged for mercy under such circumstances. Naturally, there were also people who were calm in the crowd, such as Tong Long. He didn't believe that the other party would kill them. If that was the case, there would be no need for such a formation. Wouldn't it be better to just kill them one by one? Releasing all of them was a kind of danger in itself. Of course, it was also a kind of attitude. He didn't believe that the 5-star army didn't even have a bit of common sense. Therefore, at this moment, he wasn't nervous at all. Instead, he squinted his eyes and looked at Bai Shuang, who was wearing a black cloak. He wanted to see what the other party was up to. Just as Tong Long expected, Bai Shuang didn't give the order to kill the captives. There were so many young men with good riding skills. Most of them were Han. If he killed them just like that, even his teacher wouldn't let him off. The reason why he had brought all these people out was because he wanted to use his powerful force to subdue them. Therefore, he opened his mouth and said, "You don't have to be afraid. We don't want to kill you. We just want to prove that we are stronger than you." Oh right, didn't someone say that they weren't convinced? Alright, we will give them a chance to show off now. No matter if it's one-on-one or many-on-many, we will accept it. But if you lose this time, please put down your pride. Alright, since it's a bet, there should be some stakes. How about this? If you can win, we will let you go unconditionally. On the other hand, if you lose, you must stay and join the 5-star army. How about it? Are you serious? The moment Bai Shuang finished speaking, Tong Long was the first to ask. Of course. There are so many brothers here. How can this be a game? Plus, we always keep our words in the army. You don't have to doubt us, Bai Shuang said in an incomparably confident tone. This time, the army camp was in an uproar. This was especially true for some of the men who were confident in their strength. They had always been fearless. Now that they had a chance to prove themselves, how could they let it go? Immediately, many people began to take the initiative to sign up. They wanted to prove themselves with their own strength and also to save themselves. Bai Shuang didn't reject these people. He ordered people to bring over the war horses that were captured before. Then, he gave everyone who wanted to fight a wooden scimitar. This was originally the weapon that the 1st Cavalry Division used to train. With such a weapon, they didn't have to worry about killing people. At most, they would only suffer some minor injuries. The first to fight were the 100 captives. Their opponents were the 100 cavalry warriors of the 4th Regiment. In front of everyone, the two sides pulled apart a distance of 2 li. Then, under the shout of Bai Shuang, the temporary referee, both sides began to exert their strength and charged at each other. It had to be said that the cavalry that caught Tong Long's eye and brought out were quite strong. They charged from afar, waving their wooden scimitars and doing all kinds of difficult tricks on the horses. Loud battle cries came from their mouths. Their imposing manner was extraordinary. In comparison, the 100 soldiers of the 4th Regiment seemed to be weaker. They didn't shout or shout. Instead, they kept moving forward in silence. As they moved forward, they kept changing their formation. The 100 people quickly formed a formation of 5 tip of the arrow. Then, they collided with the 100 captives in a way that could pierce through their hearts. 1 chopstick was easily broken. 10 chopsticks couldn't be broken. When the two sides began to collide, the tip of the arrow array displayed its unique and powerful strength. Under the coordination of each other, the soldiers of the 4th Regiment only needed to take care of the enemies in front of them. As for their left, right and back, there were naturally other comrades in charge of protecting them. This allowed them to maximize their attacking power. On the contrary, the captives were fighting for themselves. Those who had a good relationship with each other only cooperated in 2s and 3s. In the face of the tip of the arrow, which was a group of 20, it was no different from a mantis trying to stop a chariot. In just one exchange, a quarter of the 100 captives fell. Then, it was time to charge again and again, entangling the enemy. Soon, the captives realized that every time they attacked with their scimitars, they could only attack one opponent. However, there would often be multiple scimitars slashing at them. Moreover, it was continuous. One move after another, it was impossible to guard against. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.